Hello, welcome. My name is SlugMTG, and today we've got another episode of the podcast. And for our second episode, I think I'm going to talk about one of my favorite Pauper decks, Turbo Fog. But to help me talk about Turbo Fog, of course, I had to get a fellow Pauper YouTuber, Spell Slam. Do you want to say hi? Introduce
Hi,
yourself
everybody.
a little bit.
So my YouTube channel is Spell Slam, and I've been recording Turbo Fog for I guess since 2016, late 2016. So it's going on a little over 3 years. It's going to be 4 years in November, I guess. Yeah, so it's been a long, long time, and I've been recording lots of different matches, but I think the most matches I've recorded were obviously of Turbo Fog. I think I have over 154 matches of Turbo Fog on my channel. That's a lot of Turbo Fog, a lot of games. And of course, the deck has changed a ton in that time. But for myself, in terms of how long I've been playing Pauper, I've been playing since about 2012. So a lot of and most of that time I've been playing Turbo Fog pretty much consistently throughout, almost 8 years, basically.
Yeah, I did not realize Turbo Fog is like that old of a deck.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think in terms of like Turbo Fog and Pauper, it's been, I guess I wouldn't say it started with me, but I think I'm the one who's played it the most. I wouldn't hesitate to make that claim anyway.
Yeah, I don't think I would hesitate either if I was playing Turbo Fog for that long.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the original lists for that, I don't know if you want to talk about that right now, but like those first lists, I'm not even sure if that first list that I came up with, that I started playing with, I came up with myself. But honestly, like looking back, I can't see anybody else playing with anything similar before that. So I don't want to say I invented it because I didn't, but I definitely have developed the list to what it is now, more or less, by a lot of exploration on my own end, and also by, seeing what other people have been playing. I've had a lot of people on MTG Salvation, which is where I had my start, on MTG, getting started, and people would come in and say, "Hey, I've been playing this deck. These are the cards that I've been using," and there's been a lot of collaboration from MTG Salvation.
Yeah, because I know you are the person that basically upkeeps the Turbo Fog primer.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
In fact, my username on MTG Salvation is Upkeep.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So definitely, if you want to read up on Turbo Fog and like see the progression of the deck, basically from, I think that primer goes back to 2015, 2014 or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's pretty old.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest primers in Pauper there, and it's also the one that has the most comments and the most like participation in terms of like people coming in, and like there's like hundreds and hundreds of posts and tens of thousands of views on that one. So it's one of the most popular in terms of Pauper anyway. It's one of the most popular primers out there, and probably one of the more detailed ones as well.
I mean, that's got to feel pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At the beginning, it was kind of a competition between me and some of the other regular posters, like who would get the most views and the most participation on theirs. And like, it used to be kind of close. Like there was like an Infect primer that was there, and kind of like be neck and neck. But like, as the years went on, those people kind of come and go. And I was the only one who really like stuck with it for all this time.
Well, I mean, yeah, it seems like you have been at it for on that Turbo Fog grind for longer than anybody else, I think.
Yeah, for better or for worse, I guess.
Yeah.
Throughout all those years, I can't even say that I've been the most successful at Turbo Fog even, which is kind of crazy to think, like someone who's been playing for so long. Well, I can't even say that I've had like a full 5-0 on in a league even, but I've been playing it consistently and being like consistently moderately successful, even if you want to see it that way.
I mean, that's how it works, right? You work so hard on a deck, and then there's someone else that's like, "Oh, I picked this up a couple days ago, and this is my 16th 5-0 with it."
I know,
and you're
right?
Just like, all right. So, do we want to go ahead and explain like what is Turbo Fog? Because a lot of people don't actually know what the deck is, or even when I play it, people are like, what is this?
Yeah, well, when you look at a deck list for Turbo Fog, it can look really weird because often there are 0 creatures. There doesn't look like there are any real win conditions. It looks really alien. It looks really, really weird. And that's kind of one of the things that I really, really love about Turbo Fog is how different it is. And it's the reason why I've been sticking with it for so long, is that it's kind of like you're playing Magic the Gathering, but you're not. You're playing a whole other game, right? And that's what keeps it kind of fresh for me after all these years. So if I were to describe Turbo Fog and what it is, well, first of all, it's a control deck. And the basic goal is to extend the game as long as possible to win, usually by milling the opponent out so they run out of cards from their deck. And you do that by playing fogs or fog cards. So, for example, well, there's the original Fog from Alpha, which is 1 mana instant. You prevent all combat damage. So you're just basically locking out the opponent. It's a control deck, but it's as close in Pauper as we're going to get to a prison deck. I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring it up because, I mean, I guess Turbo Fog is a mill deck, but it's different than pretty much any other mill deck I've seen, because most mill decks are kind of like a burn deck, where they're trying to run through the opponent's library as fast as possible. Whereas with Turbo Fog, it's much more about just creating like a lock for your opponents to not be able to kill you.
Exactly. So it's about not dying more than it is about winning, right? So that's like you said, it's a lot of pure mill decks want to win as fast as possible, almost like a combo. Like, I don't want to say the burn is a combo, it's more of an aggro deck, but like, this is not an aggro mill deck. Winning is secondary. You don't care about winning until you win, right?
Yeah, you accidentally win.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think that's one of the main mistakes that a lot of new people who start to play Turbo Fog make, is that when they pick up the deck and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to play my Jace's Erasure on turn 2, and I'm going to use my Muddle the Mixture to fetch out the next Jace's Erasure and play it immediately and try to mill the opponent out, by turn 7 or something. Well, you're going to get run over most of the time. That's not the way to think about it, right? You want to try and delay your opponent as much as possible, and then before you know it, you've won on like turn 12 or 13 or something.
Yeah, or the opponent scoops because they don't want to play against it.
Yeah, basically.
And then you win anyway.
Yeah, I suppose so. And I mean, I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, it's definitely probably one of the weirdest Pauper decks, at least I've played, but probably that I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's and a lot of people, like, you can tell that Turbo Fog is an advantage when people don't know what it is, right? So the less people are aware of Turbo Fog, the better it is for you.
Yeah. So so here we are making content that is specifically telling people what Turbo Fog is and giving them lots of information.
Yeah. It's a balance, right? So like, I want people to play Turbo Fog and I want people to enjoy it, but it's supposed to be a rogue deck and it's not ever going to be anything else, right? And that's part of what I think is cool about it, and what's interesting about it is that, like, the less people know what to expect, the more prepared you're going to be.
Yeah, it really is one of those decks where if Turbo Fog ever became, like, just probably a nightmare scenario for a lot of people, Turbo Fog became very viable as a strategy. There are so many ways to actually beat it that if people just started actually sideboarding against it, it would be like,
oh yeah,
Turbo
the deck
Fog would fall.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not a single chance, right? As soon as Turbo Fog has hate against it, it just crumbles, right? There's not much you can do, like against like Flaring Pain, to stop. That card is I hate that card and I love that card at the same time, because that's the only thing that keeps me in check often.
Yeah,
right? And I think that gets into kind of my next point of what Turbo Fog is. As a prison deck, when I'm playing Turbo Fog, I don't think about necessarily how I'm going to win or what my opponent's doing. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at blanking my opponent's deck, right? And blanking large portions of my opponent's deck, or making their decks, making most of the cards in their deck blanks. So that it's kind of like the opposite of card advantage, where my opponent's drawing cards that they know are useless.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, like, like a normal pauper deck's going to have like 16 to 22 lands, and those are basically blanks. And then our dozen fogs that we run in Turbo Fog basically blank every single creature in their deck. So if they're running like, 20, 16, 30 creatures, well, all those cards become dead cards.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, when you're not running creatures, all the removal that they're playing suddenly becomes blank as well. So an average deck is not going to have very many ways to interact with Turbo Fog. And that's part of what the advantage of playing Turbo Fog is that most of your opponent's deck just can't deal with what's going on.
Yeah, which is where, like the rogueness of it, where the less people that are expecting it, the less they'll actually have answers. Because, I mean, who expects to run up against Mill in Pauper?
Nobody. That's the thing. Yeah. So, and yet there are such great answers to Mill, but nobody plays them.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely Felden's Cane, which I forget how much it gets to put down, but you get a tap, you exile Felden's Cave, and you shuffle your graveyard back into your library.
Yeah, that's a 1-mana artifact.
Yeah, it's 1 mana. And then there's also, we got Clear the Mind, I think, from recent Ravnica sets, which does, the same thing. And I think you draw a card as well.
Yeah, you draw a card for 3 mana. Yeah, I actually I ran in Azorius Fog deck that used Clear the Mind as the win condition. So I ran, I think, just Thought Scour, the 1 mana instant to mill 2 cards and draw a card.
Oh, no.
I played 2 of those and 2 Clear the Mind, and that was it. No Jace's Erasure. Nothing.
That sounds really interesting, but it sounds absolutely horrible to go up against.
Oh, it was, I played a full league with it, and then I just put it away. It was it was just such a slog to grind through every single game. And I think, in my first match playing that style of deck, I actually ended up going up against Slivers in my first match, and I actually timed out in my first match.
Oh, wow.
2 Slivers, because I just couldn't keep up with all the clicking that I needed to do.
Yeah, so Turbo Fog is basically just a deck that, obviously it's a mill deck. However, the main goal is to just stay alive, and by incidentally staying alive, you will eventually win the game through milling.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's... Which is kind of interesting, because it really just, it really illustrates how milling is kind of secondary to the main goal of staying alive.
That's right. Yeah, so I don't even think about winning most of the time, because it's not what's important. Oddly enough, the important thing is just not dying.
Yeah, I actually won't really even start to think about how I'm closing out the game until like turn 7 or 8 at the earliest, if I've gotten like a really good start. It's just about like slowing down the opponent. What is my opponent's game plan? Like trying to sculpt my hand kind of for something like that against my opponent. And then once they're down to like below half or like below 20 cards in the library, then I'll start making like a really good push to close out the game. But until then, it's just survive.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's it really depends on the matchup as well. Like you say, the more you know your opponent's deck and what they're trying to do, like you'll start to sculpt your hand around that. Against certain strategies, you have to think, as soon as turn 1 or 2, like, oh, I need to start winning quickly. But against most decks, that's not the case. You're just trying to delay them as much as possible.
So it's so where did Turbo Fog come from? Like because did you say you got like did you, when you were playing Turbo Fog like 8 years ago, did you get the list from someone, or did you just try to come up with it yourself?
So I'll tell you, the very first the very first list of Turbo Fog that I had looks absolutely nothing like the one today.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I ran a bunch of like Merfolk looter effects instead of draw
Oh,
cards.
wow.
Yeah. So, and then I ran Freed from the Reel, which is a 3-mana enchantment that lets you pay a blue to either tap or untap the creature.
Mm-hmm.
So I would cycle through my deck using that to find my next fog, and then I would eventually win with Viridian Longbow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like completely different setup from today. And essentially, well, I mean, I guess this kind of ties into why I was playing Turbo Fog and why I kind of chose this to be like my dark horse deck, and why I've been playing it for so long is because, well, when I started playing Pauper, the big deck at the time was Infect.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're familiar with what Infect used to look like in like 2011, 2012, but it basically ran the Pauper format at that time.
Oh, wow.
So these decks, they play like a Glistening Elf. I think that's what it's called. Glistener Elf on turn 1, and then you'd be dead on turn 2.
On turn 2?
Yeah, so turn 2 kills were super common at
wow.
that time.
Yikes.
Everybody was playing Infect.
Is either Infect or just like probably 1 or 2 decks that can maybe put up a fight against Infect if you drew well.
Yeah, so there was Infect, which came out, in Scars of Mirrodin in I think 2010, and then right after that Mirrodin block, it was Innistrad block, right, which came out in 2012, I think.
So
and then Delver of Secrets came along. Like, can you imagine a world without Delver of Secrets in Pauper?
Oh man,
it's crazy, right? But so those Delver decks, with Daze and Force Spike and stuff, were the only decks that were kind of keeping Infect sort of in check, as well as like Mono Black Control was kind of a thing. We're talking even before Grey Merchant of Asphodel was even printed. So this is a really like a different world.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about like all these staples that you see nowadays where like because I started playing Pauper around the banning of blue with Gush and Daze.
Oh, okay.
So I'm still like I'm relatively newer. I can't really say that I'm new anymore, but yeah, I'm relatively newer. So to like think of a world without Grey Merchant and Delver and all of these other staples, it's like, oh wow.
Yeah, it was a different game. It was a completely different game. So, like I said, those decks were winning on turn 2, and so me and my friends, we were playing Pauper on our own, and so when we decided to get into Pauper, my friend immediately said, "Oh, I'm going to play Infect," and I went, "Oh, oh darn." So I started looking around. I was like, "What would be the best way to kind of screw over to metagame my friend?" Basically. And I thought, oh, well, there's this little card called Fog that I can also play on turn 1, so that even if my opponent's on the play, they can't win on turn 2. So as long as I have this Fog, I can prevent my opponent from winning, and they'll never see it coming, right? Yeah. And then on top of that, there's another card from Alliances called Undergrowth. I don't know if you've ever seen that card.
I don't think I have.
It's a 1-mana instant. And it's basically the same thing as Fog, except better. So you can pay, I think, an additional red and 2 generic mana, and you can make it so that it prevents all combat damage that would be dealt this turn, except by red creatures.
Okay.
It's a really weird card, but it's so it was basically the Fogs 5 through 8 in my deck. So I ran 8 1-mana Fogs just to screw over my Infect playing friend.
So how successful was this early strategy?
Well, it was good at beating Infect, but it was.
Yeah, that doesn't give much hope for the other matchups. By the way, you said that.
Yeah, that's it. So aside from beating Infect regularly, it was terrible against absolutely everything else.
No.
Because like with those Merfolk looters and all those looter effects, it was just, any removal would get rid of your card draw engine. It was just a very easy strategy to interact with that was only made to beat a deck that didn't interact with you.
Yeah.
And so once I started playing more than just against Infect decks, I had to start thinking, okay, well, maybe this is not working for me. I need to think of other solutions. And so that's where the people on MTG Salvation would help me out. They would suggest a lot of things. And eventually I came across this card called Words of Wisdom. I don't know if you've ever seen this card before.
Maybe.
It's a 2-mana instant from Odyssey. And it's you draw 2 cards and each opponent draws 1 card.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this card was kind of like the Howling Mine of our Pauper format, basically.
Okay.
Where you would kind of replace your own Words of Wisdom, net yourself an extra card, and then your opponent would get to draw a card, which was often a dead card, because as we talked about already, you were blanking a lot of your opponent's cards. So you didn't really care that they get to draw a card, and it even helped to mill them in a lot of cases too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we could talk about like what Turbo Fog kind of looked like outside of Pauper, because it kind of influenced those early lists a little bit, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, is this like an archetype that is I shouldn't say, you know, like maybe not viable, but is this an archetype that will pop up in other formats as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look back and do some research on like how Turbo Fog has done in the past in other formats, you'll see a lot of standard lists. I think the most notable one is the one from 2018, which I'm sure you already know, which is the one that used Root Snare or Haze of Pollen, and then ended up looping the game with Nexus of Fate.
Oh, ew. Oh, yeah, the Nexus of Fate deck.
Yeah, so that was considered a Turbo Fog deck for a long time.
Oh, I never really thought of that as a Turbo Fog deck. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, it played some fogs, you know, like 4 to 8 fogs. It played counter spells and removal, and then it just looped the game endlessly with Nexus of Fate. And what better way to fog an opponent out by not letting them ever take a turn ever again, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Now that you say it, it's like, yeah, I mean, it does play like a Turbo Fog deck, but it's not. Yeah, I'm used to Pauper. There's no extra turn spells or anything
exactly.
But yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So that was kind of the big win for Turbo Fog, basically in Standard, was that 2018 deck with Nexus of Fate, which, you know, drove everybody crazy. Everyone was sick of that deck, and it's understandable, obviously.
Yeah.
If not, like, you have to go really far back to find another like viable Turbo Fog deck. I found Olivier Ruel would play an Esper Fog deck in 2010. And then there's also Koji Takanashi, who played an Azorius Fog deck in 2009.
Huh.
So those are kind of like, no one's playing green. They're all playing blue and white as their main colors, and Olivier would also splash black in there. But essentially, I mean, when you think about what Turbo Fog is in other formats, well, it's those consistent draw engines like Howling Mine, that 2-mana artifact that lets everybody draw a card on their turn. So they play many copies of that. And the reason why those decks were so successful in the late 2000s was that they would have Howling Mine and Font of Mythos, which is like a double Howling Mine. It's a 4-mana artifact that lets you draw 2 cards at the beginning of your upkeep. And so because you would play that on your turn and the opponent would draw the cards first, they would mill out before you every time.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and then the rest of the deck is pretty much just like Turbo Fog, where they would delay the game as much as possible until the opponents just drew themselves out of the game.
Yeah.
If you wanted to really like stretch the definition of Turbo Fog, you could say that there is a modern deck, a mono blue modern deck that basically is Turbo Fog.
Mono blue modern deck. I don't think I know this one.
Yeah, so you might have heard it. Its title would be Taking Turns.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's definitely not what I had in mind for it.
Yeah, so if you think about it, Taking Turns plays all those 5-mana or you know, all those extra turn spells like Time Warp, the one that has Miracle, and it'll basically just loop extra turns forever, and then at the same time it's playing those Howling Mines and those extra draw spells, so that the opponent basically can't take advantage of it because they're never taking another turn, right?
Yeah.
if you really wanted to stretch the definition of what turbo fog is, well, you could kind of say that this is along the same lines.
Mm-hmm.
Because it kind of uses the same sort of pieces, but we're getting really far off track from what it looks like in Pauper.
Yeah, so yeah, that's really interesting though. Just to see kind of like the same-ish strategy just pop up in various formats, and it looks so different in each one.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one final list that actually really inspired me to play Turbo Fog, and well, I don't know how long have you been playing Magic for?
I first picked it up around, it was in high school. I want to say around 2011 or 12. It was on a school band trip, so my parents couldn't say no because they weren't there. So my friends helped me get into it, but I didn't really start. But I had no idea what I was doing, basically. Like, everyone I played with was super casual. It was just kitchen table, like 5-person games. Everyone has their like 60 cards. It's just, oh, this is a Rakdos deck, so I'm gonna you want to trade all your black and red cards to me? And that was pretty much it.
I mean, that sounds about like when I started around 2000, and I was playing that was during the Odyssey block, like 1999 2000 kind of thing. And so I started off kind of in the same boat. But I don't know how present you were on the internet, but around 2011, what was happening a lot of the time is that people would write up reports of their successful outings at tournaments and stuff. Have you ever like read those before?
I've read now. I wasn't really heavily into Magic until about Kaladesh. I stopped sometime once I graduated high school. I pretty much stopped playing casually with friends because you stop seeing all of your friends in high school when you graduate. And I didn't really pick it back up until another friend got me back into Magic around Kaladesh, and since then I've read and followed like tournaments loosely, and I'll consume like a wide variety of content, but it's so if it's like newer, I've probably at least heard of it and have a vague idea of what's going on. But as far as like tournaments back before that time, then I probably don't know too much about it.
Yeah, well, it was like a common practice that whenever you would go and you were on forums like MTG Salvation, for example, or MTG The Source was the place for legacy decks, basically. And people would write up reports for like their tiny tournaments and their local game stores and stuff, just to, like talk about their decks, basically. And that was kind of the only resource that you had for like how successful decks could be. And this one guy posted a report of his legacy Turbofog deck going 5-0 at his local game store.
Oh, wow.
And this report is hilarious. It is it's probably my favorite report I've ever read in my life. It is so worth reading because he goes up against like ad nauseum tendrils and like all these like reanimator combo decks, and he just like destroys everybody. But it seems like he's kind of doing it out of sheer luck, the way that he's writing it, and it's just so inspiring and hilarious. I don't know if you can kind of quote. You can probably put that up on your on your podcast because it's so worth reading. It's really, really funny.
Yeah, I can probably put it. I'll put a link to it in the description down below if you send me the link. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's really. I mean, it sounds funny. I've had experiences like that. Only it's the opposite, where I don't win because never lucky. But
this guy was so lucky. Anyway, he was playing like Orim's Chant, Peace Talk, Angel's Grace. He did have a green splash for Moment's Peace and Constant Mist. So I don't know if you know any of those cards. They're kind of old school legacy cards. Like Orim's Chant is basically like the best fog ever because it stops the opponent from attacking, and if you kick it for an extra white mana, it stops him from playing spells.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so he could infinitely loop Orim's Chant to prevent somebody from attacking or casting spells.
Yeah, that's pretty. That'll prevent your opponent from winning the game. I think.
So yeah, definitely worth a read if you're curious. And it's what really inspired me a lot to like build that Turbo Fog deck against my friend's Infect deck at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out after this.
Yeah.
So as through the years, as you have upgraded the Turbo Fog list to where it is now, what are some of like the cards that were initially in the list that was like really hard to let go now that we take a current look at the list now? What were some of the tougher cuts through the years?
I think the toughest cut for me was letting go of Words of Wisdom at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's definitely not played now.
No, well, you can still occasionally see it as like a one of or a two of in some people's decks, but
Okay.
you don't really see it played massively. Like I used to play that as a four of and Vision Skeins at the same time, which is a 2-mana instant that would have everybody draw 2 cards, not just 2 for you and 1 for them.
Okay.
So I would play 8 copies basically of that.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to think of anything else. Yeah, there was as the meta changed, Words of Wisdom got a lot worse because Delver decks were becoming very, very popular, and you do not want to give free cards to Delver ever.
Yeah, I've lost plenty of games because I stopped them from doing something with Arcane Denial. Which,
oh god, yeah, you don't want to use. I would sometimes board out Arcane Denials against them.
I'm starting to do, because before I was like, what? No, it's counterspells. I need interaction, and now I'm just like, no, it's free card advantage for them. I'm not. Yeah. So in case people listening don't know, Arcane Denial, it's a 2-mana counterspell, and at the beginning, so you counter target spell, and then at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, you get to draw a card, which is great, but your opponent gets to draw 2 cards. Which, yikes. There's some matchups where you're just like, yes, take those 2 cards, mill yourself out faster. And then there are some matchups where you're just like, oh, this feels so bad to play.
Yeah.
No.
Against the good matchups, it's the best counter spell ever.
Mm-hmm.
But then against the so-so matchups or the bad matchups, it's the worst counter spell ever.
It feels so bad.
Yeah. So what I've actually gotten to doing now is whenever I keep them in now, the Arcane Denials. But what I do now is when I'm in a counter war and I'm losing, I will actually counter my own spell that they were trying to counter in the first place, so that I can draw 3 cards.
Yeah, I've definitely done that before, and it feels good.
I can't say that it feels good because you lost the counter war.
Well, yeah.
But at least you got something back for it, right?
And you feel cool for doing it because you're like, that's right, I'm countering my own spell, and it's a good thing for the a little bit maybe.
What a pro!
I've actually had someone. We were in a counter war, and they countered my fog, which it was one of those where I was mainly only playing the fog. That way I could get it out of my hand or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I don't, want to take like 12 damage. I'll survive, but I don't want to take it right now. So I counter their first counter, and then they counter, then I counter, and then they counter again. I'm like, oh, well, okay. And so they still have enough mana available for another counter spell. And I'm like, it's like, do I want to? And so I decide to just go ahead and counter one of my own counters. That way I could just at least get something out of the interaction, because they were playing like a bunch of Aggro Decks, so I knew they had some, and like lots. So most likely they had some, and so I counter one of my own counters, and then they play a counter targeting my fog again.
Oh no!
Because they didn't realize that I didn't target And so they ended up just like completely wasting that counter spell, and I was like, yes.
Oh, that's so good.
I was like, yes.
Awesome. Oh, that's a good feeling. Yeah, for sure.
That felt great.
I think I would always counter my fog at the first spell in the stack.
Mm-hmm.
Just because if they want to counter the Arcane Denial, they would get less value out of that than a counter that's already getting countered. But I mean, that's sweet. That's really awesome.
Oh, that felt so good. I was like, that's right. Yes. I forget if
Yeah.
I ended up winning or not, but I won in that moment. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, you're winning at that particular moment in time by drawing yourself those 3 cards.
Mm-hmm.
Now the big combo for me is definitely playing Weather the Storm with some extra storm counters and then you counter one of the copies of your Weather the Storm to draw 3 cards for free, basically.
I mean, what, pay 4 mana, gain 12 life, draw 3 cards? That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely one of the things. Oh yeah, I really like doing that. It feels good.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite thing to do right now. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. It's okay. So we've talked about the list a bit. How strong would you say Turbo Fog is in like the current meta?
Well, I think we talked about it. It's a metagame deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's viable or not can like fluctuate a lot depending on what the meta's looking like. Like right now, we're seeing a lot of Delver and we're seeing a lot of like Flickertron, right?
Yeah.
And those are 2 of the worst matchups for Turbo Fog. And they're making up like combined, they're probably making up well over 25% of the meta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
I'd say.
So Turbo Fog right now is not, I wouldn't consider it super viable, but on the other hand, when you think of what is good against Tron and what is good against Delver, well, it's Stompy and those fast aggro decks, right?
Yeah.
So Turbo Fog preys on the counters to its own bad matchups.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about it that way, when you see a lot of those Tron decks and you see a lot of those Delver decks winning, well, you can tell yourself, well, I'm probably not the only one metagaming. And you have to think, okay, well, then I can probably play Turbo Fog because I will run into those Stompy decks, those Sliver decks, and get a really, really good matchup against them.
All right.
So all in all, I'd say it's probably like it's probably fair to play it in the metagame, but you're gonna end up, facing off against a Tron deck that, flickers you to eternity and you can't deal with that infinite value.
Yeah, there was I'll talk more about this later, but because I recently did my first Pauper League ever, and I decided to do it with Turbo Fog. Nice. And I'll get more into details later, but there's my very first match, I was up against Tron, and I got them super low, like less than 10 cards in their library. And what they ended up doing was all the creatures that I had milled them, they would just flicker Mortuary Mire and Mnemonic Wall and place them all back on top of the library.
Oh no.
So it's like I could still technically win, but I needed to drag the game out for at least like 6 or 7 more turns. That way they would draw all the creatures into their hand. And I lost, but it was I was like, no, come on, because that's not really something I see every Tron deck doing. So like some Tron decks don't include Mortuary Mire.
Yeah, that's right. And so you went up against a Tron player who was actually prepared for Turbo Fog. Basically.
Who prepares for Turbo Fog? I play Turbo Fog and I don't build my decks to deal with Turbo Fog.
You would be surprised. People really don't like this deck. And I see like an inordinate amount of like Flaring Pains and like enchantment removal that a lot of the time doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And like some people are really scared of this deck, even though they'll probably never play against it ever.
Yeah, so speaking about like the meta fluctuating, I think part of that, at least with the Flaring Pain, so Flaring Pain is an instant, red instant, and damage can't be prevented this turn. And the worst thing about it, why I hate it so much, and why I think it's also, probably good to have in Pauper, but no, I hate it. It has flashback. Yeah,
for 1 red.
And so even if you counter it, they just flash it right back, and it's like, it didn't even matter in the first place.
Yeah,
but
so you need to have your Fog and 2 counter spells just to deal with that 1 card.
Yeah, so I think with Tron at least, the because I've noticed Tron is relying almost solely on Moment's Peace now to stop and survive. Like I don't see Stonehorn Dignitary, or if I do, it's like a one of in the list. So
Yeah,
it's Tron is like they're going away from Stonehorn and going towards Moment's Peace, which I think is pushing more people to include Flaring Pain in their sideboards.
right.
And I've definitely noticed more Flaring Pains recently than even like a month ago or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as you say, a month ago, Tron decks were playing like 2 or 3 Stonehorn Dignitaries in their main deck, and they'd often have more copies in the sideboard on top of having 1 or 2 Moments Peace, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, who's the better fog deck? Is it Turbo Fog or is it Tron?
Turbo Fog, I think, right? Is that what we're getting at?
I'm not even sure that's true, right? Because
it's definitely not true.
I'd like to think it is, but honestly, you can't deal with the infinite value of Tron decks, and they basically outfog the fog deck in a lot of ways.
Because I mean, Tron's running Mnemonic Wall, and if they get a couple Mnemonic Walls out and a Ghostly Flicker, then they can just recur Ghostly Flicker and Moment's Peace each time, and just get back and just make sure to have a Moment's Peace every single turn.
Exactly. So, what do you think you'd hate playing the most? If you're playing Stompy, would you prefer to play against Turbo Fog or Flickertron?
Oh, I actually don't know. I might actually prefer the Tron matchup, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because with Tron, they're playing creatures that you can interact with. So, like, you have the Savage Swipes, you have things like your Vines of Vastwood, your Ram Throughs. Well, maybe not Ram Through, but at least in the sideboard, you have like your Epic Confrontations as well, and things like that. And you're expecting the Tron matchup. Whereas if you go up against Turbo Fog, basically like Vines of Vastwood, Hunger of the Howl Pack, all these like pump spells, and then Savage Swipe as well, they are completely dead.
Yep. Yeah,
and
exactly.
There's like, I don't think Stompy includes Graveyard Hate in their sideboard because they're just so aggressive.
Yeah, they don't tend to do that anymore. You'll see like occasionally a relic or two, but like the main way that they interact with Turbo Fog is with Viridian Longbow.
Yeah.
Because they have the Korean Ranger and they can untap their creature and deal you like easily 3 or 4 damage a turn, in the late game. Luckily, Turbo Fog runs counters, and so it's not a huge deal. And often, I don't know how your sideboard looks necessarily, but I'm running Return to Nature as well and stuff to deal with that Viridian Longbow, because that is a card that I see often in the Elves lists and in the Stompy lists all over the place, because it's so good against Delver as well. Like, they're not putting Viridian Longbow into their deck to deal with Turbo Fog.
Yeah.
It's incidental hate, I guess.
And honestly, when I'm up against Mono Green Stompy, that is literally the only thing I'm looking to counter. That you can play whatever you want, but if I see that bow, it's getting countered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which means that like all of my Arcane Denials all of a sudden turn to draw spells. If I manage to have like 3 in hand or something, which if the game goes long, that's not unheard of.
Absolutely.
And then it's just like, oh, I don't need 3 Arcane Denials. Okay, I'll use 1 to draw 3 cards. And it just becomes miserable for the mono green Stompy player.
Yeah, absolutely. And the matchup has actually improved, if that was even possible. It's improved so much thanks to Stream of Thought.
I love that card.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's crazy. But it's really improved the aggro matchups, because like the main way that you would actually die to Stompy and Slivers and stuff was actually running out of fogs, because they'll make you start fogging on like turn 3. And so if you want to survive, you have to be able to fog every single turn from a very, very early turn, which wasn't always possible. But with Stream of Thought, you're shuffling those fogs back into your deck and increasing that fog count basically infinitely.
Yeah. There was someone on Reddit. I posted a screenshot on the main Magic subreddit where I pondered. Obviously, I was playing Turbo Fog, and I pondered, and I found my other 3 ponders were the 3 cards that I looked at. And so I ran a hypergeometric like calculation on that, and it was, I forget the exact percentage, but it was extremely low. I think it was, I want to say like less than 1%, obvious, like less than, I think it was less than 0.5%.
I'm sure it must be something like 0.3% or something like that. I'm sure it's extremely low.
Yeah, so I ran, and then someone in the comments pointed out that I had used Anticipate, and like, so it wasn't quite where I had put cards on the bottom of my library, so it wasn't quite there, but still, it was still like extremely low odds. And someone was just like, wait, are you playing Pauper Turbo Fog? And it's like, yes. And they're like, oh, like, and so they started talking, and they're just like, why do you have Stream of Thoughts? Like, why aren't you running 4 Jace's Erasures and just going with that? And like, I tried to explain to them like how useful Stream of Thought is, and this was before the latest update to the list. Yeah,
no, Stream of Thought is just better than Jace's Erasure. There's just no comparison at this point. When you think about, like, yeah, Jace's Erasure is maybe better if you play it on turn 2 or like in the very, very early stages of the game, but Stream of Thought is just, you can do so much more with it than you could with Jace's Erasure. It's a much better card overall, and that just giving you that infinite value, being a very cheap spell to cast, and also the fact that it's not an enchantment makes it so that green decks and white decks have even less ways of interacting with you than they did before.
I found for some reason people, I played like, before when we included Jace's Erasure in the list, like people would sideboard in like annuls.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's like 2 cards out of like, it's just like,
yeah, no, it's crazy.
Like, why would people
I had a
bring in
win
annuls?
against a Delver. Sorry.
No, all of you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I was saying I had a win against a Delver deck a few years ago, and it was a super close match, but the opponent had a full hand, like almost the entire game. And then it came down to a counter war on the very, very last possible turn, and then he revealed his hand at the end of the game, and it was 3 annuls.
That's
just completely dead.
It's more copies than Jace's Erasures.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, so it just doesn't make any sense when they could just be running generic counter spells. And it's just the more people know how to fight Turbo Fog, the more effective it will be. But it's those matchups where people have no idea what to do, and they say, "Oh, well, I see Jace's Erasure. Let's deal with it this way." But it's actually not the most effective way to do that.
It's actually one of the most inefficient ways, because you're sideboarding in a card that is completely useless against 58 of the 60 cards that the opponent is running.
Yep, exactly.
So
and sometimes it's not even it's not even going to affect the outcome of the match, right? So countering a Jace's Erasure is not a huge deal most of the time.
Yeah, well, we know that now. Before I was like, oh, but Jace's Erasure, it's so good when you can. And now that I've played without the Jace's Erasure, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, we don't need it.
No, for sure. It's just it's become just unnecessary in the modern Turbo Fog deck, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I did want to talk a little bit about that, because one thing that I have noticed is with the Jace's Erasure, I really liked it against control decks.
Yeah,
and getting it out early, because what I find is, I think overall it's a change for the better, and because now, well, back before you would run like either 4 or 5 like mill effects.
Yep.
With like 2 or 3 copies of Jace's Erasure, and then 2 or 3 copies of Stream of Thought, and that was your win condition. And versus now, you can pretty much just have 3 or 4 cards, where it's 3 or 4 copies of Stream of Thought, depending on personal preference.
Right.
And however, one thing I have noticed though is with Jace's Erasure, if you got it down early, there was the upside of constantly taking resources away from your opponent. And if you managed to mill a couple counter spells early on, then that's 2 counter spells that your opponent didn't get. Versus now with Stream of Thought, where you're kind of holding on to it until it's a good moment where you can maybe tap out a little bit to get it. You're not interrupting that flow of cards into your opponent's hand, and they have the opportunity to kind of just sculpt and choose which cards they actually want to keep when it is gearing up for that counter war at the end of the game that's inevitably going to happen.
Absolutely. Which I don't know if it makes it worse against control decks, but it definitely makes it worse against like those tempo decks, or those mid-range decks that do have interaction on the stack. Those matchups did get maybe a little bit worse, I suppose. I still will run out Stream of Thought like on turn 1 or something just to get it out of my hand and not get any value out of it by shuffling cards back in, because I know that I can loop them, right? So you can choose the second Stream of Thought that you play, you'll just shuffle the other Stream of Thought back in. And it's basically like a free spell almost that you don't really need to worry about. But I do understand what you mean. Like you could basically just play Jace's Erasure on turn 2 and then forget about it.
Yeah, there's no more resources. Here's a question we probably should have asked earlier. Did we explain what Stream of Thought was?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So why don't you explain it?
All right. So this is a 1 blue mana for sorcery, and essentially you can target an opponent and have them mill 4 cards, and you can also shuffle up to 4 cards back into your own deck. Now that's already pretty good, but it gets even better. You can replicate this card for 2 blue mana and 2 generic mana, which means that you can copy its effect by paying that 4 mana any number of times you choose. So for example, if I pay 5 mana, like 3 blue and 2 generic mana, I can shuffle 8 cards back into my deck and mill my opponent for 8 cards. If I want to pay 9 mana, I can mill my opponent for 12 in one shot and shuffle up to 12 cards back into my own deck. So you can see how this scales really, really well into the late game.
Yeah, why it wasn't just multi-kicker, I don't understand, but
different names for very, very similar mechanics, basically.
Yeah. How many times have you had someone counter, like you replicate Stream of Thought once or twice, and you have someone counter the first one, and then not realize that it's still going to go off anyway?
I don't think that's actually ever happened to me. People don't usually seem to, from personal experience, people don't really seem to be bothered by Stream of Thought.
That's happened to me at least 2 or 3 times where it's like closer to the end of the game and they have like maybe 20 cards and I'll Stream of Thought replicating once or twice and they'll counter the Stream of Thought and then the 2 copies will go off and mill them regardless. And it's actually kind of useful because their counterspell will go off before putting the Stream of Thought into the graveyard, and then when the copies go on the stack, I can take the original Stream of Thought and shuffle it back in.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I've done that 2 or 3 times, and I am surprised to hear that it hasn't happened to you.
No, that has never come up for me. That's
wow.
I find that really strange, actually. Like things like Storm and Replicate, those people don't seem to counter those, really.
I mean, it's so inefficient too.
Yeah, it is. It's a real feel bad when you have to counter something that's still going to generate extra copies of itself, right?
Like you spent a whole card to counter 1/3 of like your opponent's card or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think people should be doing that, or unless it lets them survive another turn, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to die, then you might as well go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it might have been like a kind of a last ditch effort for that. And it also, I mean, like, I don't know what kind of counter magic you're going up against, but some people will play like those 3 mana counters that exile the spell.
Let's see.
Upon
exile.
resolution. Like Fairy Trickery, for example.
I don't think I've gone up against that one. I've gone up against Devious Cover-Up, which is a 4 mana one.
Yeah, Devious Cover-Up's another one. There's also Syncopate that does the same thing. It's an X counter.
Yeah.
X and 1 blue mana. So you'll see Tron run that occasionally. But so unless you're running something like that, then it's not usually worth the effort, I think, anyway.
Yeah. So What are some of like the matchups when you sit down to play Turbo Fog? What is like let's start with the best ones. What are you sit down, you're like, I really hope my opponent's playing this.
I really hope my opponent's playing a plains. If I see a plains on turn 1, I'm already thinking, okay, I got this. Right? Even if it's the pestilence deck, their deck, aside from having pestilence and crypt rats, which you can counter or deal with in multiple ways, they're not basic. Most of their deck is dead, right? They have a few little life gain spells. Their creatures, they don't run too many of them, so their deck is really slow. So you have a lot of time to kind of get going. So even against those white control decks, it's really, really good to see that white coming out.
Yeah, the only exception I will put for that is Boros.
But does Boros even play plains?
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. If you see just a plain plains, then you're probably safe. But that's actually a good point.
Yeah, that Boros matchup has changed a lot over the years. Like, I think it's gotten a little bit worse, but I think it's just from me not playing against it as well. Like, I think I've been misreading the board state recently, and I need to kind of like understand the deck a little bit better to like understand when the crux of the deck is happening, when that big counter war is happening, and kind of I could play differently to win that matchup. So I don't feel like it's a bad matchup. I feel like I just need to get good, basically.
Yeah, so other than plain plains, what else do you like to see?
Any aggro decks, like Stompy, Mono Black Aggro, Hexproof, Slivers. Those are the kinds of things that I love to see.
Yeah, because there's so few things that you actually have to worry about.
Yeah, exactly. You can just worry about getting your next fog, drawing as many cards as possible, and then next thing you know, they're dead. Against like Hexproof, you do have to worry about the fact that they are going to run Flaring Pain in their sideboard that they can cast off of, red mana that they can make incidentally. But aside from that, that's really all you have to worry about. I can't say I've never lost a Hexproof. It happens, but it's extremely unlikely.
I mean, sometimes you just draw like 4 lands in a row, and you're just like, oh, come on. And you just lose, and you just fizzle.
The best way to lose against these good matchups is losing to yourself.
Turbo Fog's definitely a deck where sometimes you just lose to yourself, and there's no possible way you could have played any different.
No, that's it. Yeah, that's it. When you're mulliganing to 5 and then you just draw a bunch of lands off the top, well, you just lost. There's nothing.
What are some bad matchups that you hate to see? Delver,
any of those, and it's not Delver of Secrets that's the problem, right? It's those Fairy, Spellstutter Sprite, and Ninja of the Deep Hours.
Dude, they're so good.
Yeah, if I see that pair of cards, the matchup gets 100% worse, and my chances of winning that become very, very low, right? Delver, Ninja of the Deep Hours, you can't counter because it has ninjutsu. Right? It's a 4-mana 2/2 with ninjutsu of 2 mana, so you can actually play it from your hand by returning an unblocked attacking creature to your hand. And and then it draws them a card every single turn. That's like basically having like your own personal howling mine for them, right? So you have to start fogging more aggressively, which causes you to lose those counter wars later on. And then Spellstutter Sprite on top of that, it's a 1-mana 1/1. It's a 2-mana 1/1 flying, and it counters a spell with converted mana cost to X, where X is the number of fairies they control. So they can actually return that Spellstutter Sprite with their ninjas to have basically like 12 or 15 counters in their deck, and it becomes extremely hard to win against that strategy.
You know the game's not going to go well when they play Spellstutter Sprite on your end step on turn 2
for no value.
There's no spell. You just like, you draw, you're like, okay, this is good, and you pass turn, and they play it, and you're just like,
that turn 2 or 3 Ninja of the Deep Hours is just practically impossible to beat.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like what, like you have to start fogging, but then, well, you can't play your 1-mana fog because they have a Spellstutter Sprite in hand, so like it's going to be countered. And if they get one, do you run any creature removal in your sideboard?
I used to back when I guess we'll talk about this bad this bad matchup in a little bit, but tribe combo was a thing for a little while. Um, Around when Gush was still legal and Days and all that stuff. So when tribe combo was around, I used to play Lingify, which is a green 2 mana, 1 green, 1 generic mana for a Tree Folk tribal enchantment, and it would turn the creature into a 0/4 Tree Folk.
Very nice.
So that was okay, except they could still attack with the Tree Folk and then ninjutsu that creature back to their hand. Right? So it was never a very effective way to deal with that. Otherwise, there was also Curse of Chains, which I also played a little bit. It just, none of that removal ever worked really, really well because they had bounce spells like Echoing Truth, or they could attack and get their creature back. So yeah, that Ninja of the Deep Powers is a huge problem for Turbo Fog.
Yeah. It's just I don't want to see the Spellslider Sprite come down end step turn 2. It's like, oh no, especially if it's game 1 and you don't have a counter spell in hand.
And that's it. And not all of your counter spells can hit the Spellstutter Sprite either, which is the other big thing. Like, I like to play the full 4 Muddle the Mixture, but Muddle the Mixture only hits instants and sorceries, which is fine most of the time because you don't care about creatures. But this is a creature that is a counter spell that you can't interact with as easily.
Yeah, in my sideboard, I run a single copy of Fadeaway, which is a sorcery, 2 and a blue, and for each creature, its controller has to sacrifice a permanent unless they pay 1. So for us, we are never going to pay anything because I don't have any creatures in the main deck or sideboard.
That's right.
And the opponent, I'll bring it in against mainly mono black control because it really hits their Gary's, their Gray Merchants, which is a creature when it enters, it drains the opponent equal to your devotion to black. And so if for these mono black decks, it's not uncommon for them to duress into Gary, where they duress, they look at your hands, and then they take your counter spell, or if you counter the duress, then that's 1 less counter spell for Gary, and if you counter that, then they have ways to get it back from the graveyard and cast it again.
Yeah.
So I like to bring in Fadeaway for those matchups, or even I've brought it in a couple times against Delvers, just to see if I can do something against fairies, but most of the time it doesn't really do all that much against fairies because then they just sacrifice their non-fairy creatures if they need to.
Yeah, I find the best thing for dealing with Spellstutter Sprite is Aerial Volley, basically. I don't know if you've played that one in your sideboard. It's a 1 mana instant that lets you deal 3 damage divided as you choose between flying creatures.
Okay, I could see that.
It's a 1 mana spell, which means that if they have another Spellstutter Sprite, you're kind of screwed anyways. But if they don't, you can basically kill, the Spellstutter Sprite when it's on the battlefield with its trigger on the stack, and then you can kill like 1, 2, or up to 3 of their little 1/1 fairies, and then basically it acts as a counter spell that's also a removal spell. So it's a complete blowout, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I might have to look into that a bit more.
Yeah, I've been a lot less concerned with the fairies lately, and I've been really like thinking about how do I beat Ninja of the Deep Hours, because that's the card that lets them keep up with card advantage with Turbo Fog.
Yeah, and that's the real one.
Yeah, that this card to me is the problem, right? And that's how my thinking about the Delver matchup has changed over time. In terms of like how to play against it. I used to be really concerned with beating that Delver of Secrets because, they played on turn 1. I was kind of groaning and I thought, oh, well, this matchup's over basically. But that's, that Delver of Secrets isn't the problem. It's really the ninja that's the problem. Even the fairies, they're only digging you for 1 at a time. Even if they play their Spellstutter Sprite, it's just a counter spell. The real problem is when they get to return it with their ninja and draw a card and then keep hitting you over and over again until you're dead, right? Until they've outdrawn you. So right. I've been, a couple people have been suggesting playing Augur of Bolas in the main deck.
I see it, but
Yeah, I kind of hesitate about that too because like a lot of the Delver decks now are playing black as a splash or red as a splash,
hmm
and they're running Scred or Snuff Out and all the removal that would normally be dead and kind of just hanging out in their hand suddenly becomes useful, right, for getting that Augur of Bolus out of the way.
yeah. And I mean, especially in Turbo Fog, I think you can make a very good case for Augur because like 95% of the time it's going to replace itself.
Yeah.
But then, it really comes down to like just those 5% scenarios where you're gonna top like 3 lands or a couple lands and another Augur. You have to put everything on the bottom, and all of a sudden you've just turned on your opponent's removal spell, and then you essentially lost a card in that trade. And especially if it's an aggressive deck like Mono Green Stompy, that you cannot be losing. Like it's a relatively easy matchup, but the way you lose that is just by like losing cards essentially.
Yeah, losing to yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And aside from that, like when during the unification of Pauper happened, you were around for that, right?
Yes.
So when Wizards decided to say, oh yeah, Pauper is a sanctioned format, all the cards that are legal in paper are now legal online and vice versa. Well, that opened up Desert as an option for fighting creatures as well. And I was super excited about that. I thought that was going to be the answer to my prayers. I was going to I'm going to stick it to Delver now. They don't stand a chance, right? But that ended up not being the case because Desert often ended up screwing me over because it was colorless mana.
Yeah.
In the early game, it made some of my hands unkeepable. And on top of that, I needed 2 of them to be able to kill the real problem, which is a Ninja of the Deep Hours. And on top of that, you needed to let Ninja of the Deep Hours actually deal damage to you in order to use the Desert.
Which means they got the card advantage anyway, so it replaced itself at the very worst.
At the very least. So that was not the answer, unfortunately, that I was hoping for. The last thing that I kind of like am toying with, and I'll probably be going back to, like, I think I am going to be trying out Augur of Bolus officially in my next playthrough of recordings, but I'm also going to be adding in probably Quicksand in my sideboard or maybe in the main deck. And Quicksand.
Explain what Quicksand is.
Quicksand's a land, non-basic, obviously. You can tap it to add a colorless mana, or you can tap and sacrifice it to give a creature without flying -1/-2 until end of turn. So the creature has to be attacking, but you don't have to wait for it to deal you damage before you can actually use it. Which means that if they ninjutsu out their Ninja of the Deep Hours, well, you can use the Quicksand on it before it actually deals the damage. Now that comes with, again, a few drawbacks. Whereas you're losing a land, right? And that's a big deal in Turbo Fog. It's a big sacrifice to make.
Oh yeah.
And also, when I tried it before, and what would happen sometimes is my opponent would ninjutsu out their ninja. I would activate Quicksand, sacrifice my land, targeting it, and then they would ninjutsu out their ninja again with another ninja. Well, so this card is abominably hard to deal with. It's so hard to find that answer.
Yeah, I mean, the tricky thing with ninjutsu is once the declare blockers phase is like declared, like they can just swap it in and out at any point with another ninjutsu card or something like that. So it's I've seen one case where someone ninjutsu'd something right at like the end of combat phase.
Yep.
So it's really kind of interesting the different ways you can kind of sneak around and play. So I think the conclusion we're getting at is ban Ninja.
Yes, ban the Ninja.
Yes,
that Ninja needs to go.
It's way too strong. Tron is fine. Ninja is
no good.
Okay, if it's strong against Turbo Fog, we need to ban it. So Flaring Pain, Ninja, hate them. Let's get rid of the color blue. Except for Turbo Fog, of course. If you're playing Turbo Fog, you can play blue. But other than that,
what would you ban from Turbo Fog? If Turbo Fog got too good, what would you actually ban from that? Like Moment's Peace?
That's really interesting because it's like, do you ban Moments Peace is the best fog in the deck.
Absolutely.
Like, by far. And it's, do you ban, if you ban Moments Peace, that might honestly just be way too harsh and just kill the deck, because then the rest of your fogs become so weak. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know what on earth would replace it. So if Turbo Fog was tier 1, I'm trying to think of like a card that are, because in this, it would really depend where the other blue decks sit. Like, if blue overall, for some reason, the best thing ever happened and blue became one of the weaker colors and people weren't playing it as much. So if blue was one of the weaker colors overall, and it was Turbo Fog's reliance on green that made it so strong.
I think at that point, if the worst happened, like, I was actually worried about this when Tron was like really picking up and people were really like grumbling about bannings. I was actually concerned that they were going to ban Moments Peace and completely wreck Turbo Fog in the attempt to try to get rid of Tron. But
they better
that didn't happen, obviously. Yeah, but I was thinking, if that ever happens, well, there's no reason to play green in Turbo Fog anymore, and I would probably move into white. White has much better fogs. The only reason that you want to play green is for Moments Peace, and Moments Peace is worth playing green for. But as soon as that card's gone, you want to be playing Dawn Charm, Safe Passage, False Peace. What else is there? Moment of Silence. Those are all much, much better fogs, and they're all in white.
Yeah, because I mean, the only other fog that even comes close to Moments Peace is Tangle. Because what makes Moments Peace so good is you buy 2 turns with 1 card.
Exactly.
Because you can cast it and then flash it back. And with Tangle, you can kind of do that, which is a fog. It blocks combat damage, and then each attacking creature doesn't untap during their next untap step. So in theory, it can buy you another turn as well, but that's only if your opponent doesn't play more creatures, or they don't have anything. They're not running like Curion Rangers to untap things themselves.
Yeah. So or if you're playing against Hexproof or something, and they give their creature vigilance, well, it's basically just a really bad fog. You might as well be playing the 1-mana version of the deck. Right. I mean, of the card. Yeah.
So I mean, Tangle is. I mean, we've all gotten. Anyone who's played Turbo Fog has gotten the dream scenario where your opponent is not expecting the Tangle, and you tap down there and like all 16 creatures or something.
Yeah. Your opponent is ready for the matchup and knows what Turbo Fog is when they have the kill, right? And they're you're at like 4 life or something, and then they just swing with 1 creature or 2 creatures. Like, they know to expect Tangle, even if they have not seen it this game.
And they're just testing. They're just like, all right, how low are you willing to go before you pull the trigger?
Exactly. Yeah. So they're really you know that this person is ready for that matchup, right? As opposed to that sliver player who's just logging onto MTGO, getting a quick league in, and they're getting impatient. Mm-hmm. And then they'll just right-click attack all with their, for like 50 damage or something. It's way overkill. And then you just smirk and play your Tangle, and then you just bought yourself a free turn. That's the best feeling.
Sucker. Yeah. I was playing against someone. It was an Aristocrats build, and I was getting to like 7. I got to like 7 life, and they had like Serrated Scorpion and Perilous Mirrors, which they deal damage upon death. And obviously they're playing Aristocrats. So they had like Carrion Feeder out as well, a free sack outlet. And I was like, oh crap. Like, so I had Muddle the Mixture in my hand, and I was like, you know what? Like, I don't have the most mana right now, but I think I just need to transmute for Weather the Storm and just like, I'm not dead yet, but wait for a turn that you have like a decent storm count, or you hold it till the last moment. And so I transmuted for Weather the Storm, which is my key to getting back into the game. And then I didn't have a counter spell though, and I walked right into the opponent's Duress on the very next turn.
No.
And they look at my hand. I was like, oh man, like of course, like this is the best thing for them. And they take Tangle.
Oh.
Because they like I had blown them out with Tangle like 3 times that match. This was like the second game, and I won the first game. And they hated Tangle so much that they took Tangle over the Weather the Storm, and I ended up winning because they didn't take the Weather the Storm.
And see, that's where Turbofog being a rogue deck is the best thing for it, right? Because if people are always making the right decisions, like
it gets so much harder.
Life does get harder, right? So you want your opponent to be unprepared and not knowing what to expect, right? And to take the wrong card and to make those mistakes. It's kind of weird to say that's kind of what you're expecting, but that's, and that's why I was so much more successful back in the day, like when I was playing in 2013, 2014, people had no idea what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they would be constantly falling into those tangles and taking the wrong cards with their duress. And they just didn't understand what the deck was doing and would lose because of it. Whereas today, I think, maybe in part because of the content that I put out, people are a lot more aware of it, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but people seem to be more prepared and more knowledgeable about what the strategy is, and therefore fight it better. And therefore, I've been finding it harder to play.
Yeah, I mean, I also put out a budget list as an easy way to get into Turbofog. So, but someone did ask me though. They were just like, "Oh, what upgrade? What upgrade should I make first?" I was thinking, like putting in like preordains and ponders and all this stuff. Like Moment's Peace.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Number one is get rid of the respites and the lulls. Okay, we don't need fogs that cycle. Get Moment's Peace. Get Moment's Peace.
Yeah, that's the number one best card you can get. I don't know, like honestly, I bought my Turbofog deck 8 years ago, so I have no idea what it costs online. Like what's the barrier to entry for a Turbofog deck?
The budget list that I built, for Hyper Budget Pauper, the main series on my channel, I try to keep the decks under 5 ticks online. And Moment's Peace, I can look it up right now, Moment's Peace was actually the first splurge for what I would consider a more expensive card. It looks like they're going for about $2 each right now.
Okay.
So, yeah, because I was in a creators tournament, and I signed up for a creators tournament, and I wanted to play Turbofog, so I splurged and bought Moment's Peace.
Yeah.
And oh my god, it's such a world of difference.
Right. I think back in the day, the most expensive card that I had to buy to play Turbofog was Accumulated Knowledge. I think they went up to almost 5 ticks at one point.
Oh wow!
I know, like that's not the case anymore. Like because there's that other card, Take Inventory. I think
Frantic Inventory.
Frantic Inventory. Yeah. So Frantic Inventory is basically like a better Accumulated Knowledge in a lot of ways. But obviously, if you want to play the version that I play, you're playing both. You're playing Accumulated Knowledge and Frantic Inventory, and you go with that. But yeah, back in the day, it was really Accumulated Knowledge that was the bulk of the cost of the deck, and everything was dirt cheap.
Yeah, now Accumulated Knowledge, I mean, that's in the budget version under 5 ticks now. So I managed to fit that in, and so it was. Yeah, now it's probably Moment's Peace. The only other one is I think it's Impulse, where you look at the top 4 and you take one.
Yeah.
Impulse is another one that I still don't have. I'm going to look up the price real quick because I forget how expensive it is. Looks like the cheapest print is about 6 ticks. Almost
You're
6.
You're kidding.
No.
What?
It's the Visions copy is I'm going by Scryfall, which is generally pretty accurate. It's 6.35 ticks, and then the Magic Online promos they're going for 11.10 ticks.
Oh my goodness, I had no idea that card was so expensive.
That did not make my budget list.
No way.
And I still don't have them because I don't want to spend $6 on. No, like are you kidding me? I can build like 5 decks for 6 ticks.
Exactly.
I'm not. So instead, I've been running. I used to run Anticipate, which is look at the top 3 and take one,
Right.
which is very cheap. But I've recently traded out because I do have Preordains and Ponders. So once I was done making the budget video, I put those in, and now I took out the 3 copies of Anticipate I was running and put in 2 copies of Pieces of the Puzzle and
Right.
1 copy of Reign of Revelation.
Oh,
Which,
wow. Yeah.
yeah. So Pieces of the Puzzle. You look at the top 5. I think it is. Is it top 5?
Yeah, it's top 5. Yep. Take 2
Yeah.
instants of sorceries.
Yeah, and then
That's
Reign
a
of
really good card.
Revelation is an instant for 4, and you draw 3, discard 1. And Reign of Revelation is a 1-of in the deck, so I find it to be pretty good because I don't tend to draw it.
Okay, yeah, I 4 mana is a lot to pay, even at instant speed, I find. But it's, yeah, I'm sure if you're on a budget, that's totally fine. Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, I would take the Impulse or over, because I mean, it's 2 mana. Look at the take the best out of the top 4. Like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But not ready for the $24 investment that would bring.
That's insane.
So
I in my previous builds of the deck, 2 draw spells that I really loved, especially against Delver decks, were Think Twice, which is a 2 mana instant that draws you a card and has a flashback of 3, and Krosan Tusker, which is a 7 mana 5/6 creature, and it has cycling of 2 generic and a green. But when you cycle it, to draw a card, you also get to search your library for a basic. So it was basically an uncounterable draw 2 that guaranteed you get a land.
I think I went for I think I looked at those because I did a little bit of research onto what I actually wanted, but I think the main reason why I settled on Pieces of the Puzzle and Reign of Revelation is the big thing that I was losing was to the deck itself, where you would okay, I'm going to just draw 1 card and you draw a land. You're like, crap. And so I was really looking at sources that looked at several cards, and I wanted more card advantage versus just a cantrip.
Have you seen Deep Analysis as well?
I considered Deep Analysis, which I almost did go with that. I could probably go with that, but honestly,
I would
Reign of
definitely play that as
Revelation
one of,
is, I don't know, doing. I might swap it out just because Reign of Revelation, if you see it in your opening hand, it's a little sad.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so here's a question: why Turbo Fog? Like, what about the deck has because obviously you've stuck with it for a long time. Like, why do you keep coming back to Turbo Fog?
Honestly, it just feels like it's just so fresh all the time. Like when you're playing, I was so sick of playing the same Magic where you play your lands, you play your creatures, you swing in, you trade with their creatures, you play removal. It was kind of like getting kind of repetitive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas when I play Turbo Fog, it's like I'm playing a different game, but I'm still playing Magic the Gathering, and it's kind of like my way of staying in it and staying fresh with that.
Yeah, because for me at least, obviously I haven't been playing nearly as long as you have, but even when I find myself wanting to try out other decks, I'll try them out for a little while, but then I'll always get an itch, I want to play a Turbo Fog game. I'm going to make one person suffer tonight. And then... So
that's one of the things I really hate about the deck is that I wish people didn't suffer so much.
Yeah, I mean, I promise I'm having fun. I just wish I could give some of that fun to you, but that would involve losing. So no.
I do get the occasional person who's messaging me and saying, "Wow, your deck is really awesome! What a cool strategy!" And that makes me feel good. I'm like, okay, finally somebody who gets it. And then other times I'm like, oh, what is this deck? This is so stupid. I wish I brought my burn deck instead.
Oh, yeah.
That would totally kill you. And you get that salt, and that makes it doesn't make me want to play Turbo Fog any less, but it makes me feel bad because my opponent's not enjoying the game. And
If someone gets salty, I live off of that energy, so I don't mind too much.
okay, yeah, I don't feel bad for them, but it doesn't make me happy to see, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
and I
Yeah.
remember I took the turbo my Turbofog deck to local game stores around my area, and I enjoyed it a lot less than playing online because
Really?
I actually got to see live my opponent's face, right? And how unhappy they were and how miserable and bored they were. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should change it up from time to time and not always be like, it's good to bring it from time to time, but I should not be bringing this every single week or every single month and making the same people miserable all the time, right?
Yeah, like even if you're a super nice person, they're gonna be sick of seeing you. And it's like,
Yeah, they're not going to want to play with you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing in Magic for me is not necessarily the game; it's that social aspect that's super
Mm-hmm.
important when playing against an actual person in front of you, right? And that's really really important to me. And I want to make sure that that person's having a good time and that we're actually having a conversation and doing that. But Turbofog is my grinding deck. It's the deck that when I want to play some Magic and I want to play it competitively. Even if the deck may not be competitive, I will take that because that's what I prefer to play.
Yeah, and I think there is some when someone was asking me about Turbo Fog, some of my friends were asking me like what or I was explaining the deck to them. I was like, okay, imagine you're living paycheck to paycheck, right? And so your opponent swings in, it's the IRS, they want their money. And you fog, you give them like you give your tenant your rent for the month. You're like, okay, I made it. And then like you got to scramble together to get enough money to pay your rent next month as well. And it's just like, it's just with Turbo Fog, like there's like I've beaten like Flickertron nearly at its strongest before, where you just draw perfectly and you just get through Tron, and they're like trying their best, but you just have the answer to
Oh
everything.
yeah, if you can get ahead and draw tons of cards and really like grind them out before they even kind of get started, then yeah, you can beat Tron for sure. Like I've won a handful of games against them, but it's not fun for the Tron player at that point where they're
Oh, they're
they're just
playing
trying to get
Tron.
off the
Who
ground.
cares
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
that?
I don't feel bad for them for sure, but I do feel bad for the Slivers player and the Stompy player a little bit who, you can tell they're losing their patience. And that's the best way for me to win is when my opponent is impatient. Like I don't know if do you know Propaganda?
Yes.
Yes, you know the Lexikov a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
he's like the father of Pauper. Like he's been playing since 2009 competitively, and like he invented the Stompy deck basically, and he's always bringing fresh stuff, and I really admire him. But he can't play Turbofog, and he can't play against Turbofog. We've met up many times, in the tournament practice room, in the leagues, and I think he's beaten me maybe like 2 out of like the dozen times that we've played,
Oh no.
just because he loses his patience and he will just start swinging wildly and not actually focusing on like how he can win. He just gets bored, right? And that's the
Mm-hmm.
worst thing for you. Like you have to stay on top of it when you're playing against Turbofog. You have to play tight. And that's what I love about playing Turbofog is you have to play well and your opponent needs to play well if they want to have a chance. As soon as they skip their combat step because they're bored or they start swinging into your tangle when they don't need to, that's when Turbofog really shines.
Yeah, so to me, one of the most fun aspects is you have to respect every single matchup. Like there is literally not a free matchup. You can
No.
lose, like, because as many times as I've beaten Tron, even when they had like a really good start, it's like I've also lost to like the most janky builds because
Yeah.
like the deck sometimes just loses to itself. And so each game you just have to like focus and concentrate and respect what your opponent's doing and just like play smart. Like the deck forces you to continuously play smart, or else you're not going to be successful with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's basically like two basic tenets that you need to follow if you want to play Turbo Fog well, and if you want to play against Turbo Fog well. And the first thing is patience. You need to be patient, and you need to know that your deck is slow, and you need to grind out and not worry about winning. The second thing is you need to know your metagame. You need to know your decks, right? You need to know, what is it against that Boros Monarch deck that is going to cause them to win? How do I play around that? What about Mono Black Control? What about Delver? You need to understand how those decks work in relation to your own if you want to have any chance, right? So those two things really make up the core of how to play Turbo Fog well.
Yeah, and it's just a deck where literally each match feels so much different than the last one you played.
Absolutely.
And it's just because it's such a reactive deck, or you aren't like it's definitely a reactive deck. You aren't like being proactive with your milling. Your goal is to survive, so you have to react to what your opponent's doing, and therefore even like minuscule changes. Like I was up against elves, which I don't know how you feel about that matchup, but I hate it. I hate elves.
Oh boy. Well, yeah, I guess I kind of, the matchup's weird because it really depends on what the elves deck is playing as its secondary win conditions. Like the primary win condition with the wirewood, what's the one that pumps the elves equal the number of elves you control?
Timberwatch.
Timberwatch elf. Yeah, that's right. So that's their kind of their main thing, as well as like kind of having a go wide strategy. So those two things you don't need to worry about. It's, are they playing Ulamog's Crusher? Are they playing Mob Justice? What is, or are they playing Dispel? You could expect absolutely anything from them. And so if you, that's the one that's the hardest to read. It's one of the hardest matchups to read properly because you don't know exactly what to expect.
I find that generally with elves, it's the first game tends to go, like about as expected. If you can hit your fogs, then you can win. But I was up against this one elves player, and I was feeling pretty good. I was like, okay, they're flooding the board, they're doing their thing, they're drawing. Like they drew over half their deck with distant melodies.
So you don't need to worry about milling them.
Yeah, so I was like, this is great. Like I already have a stream of thought in my hand. All I need is like one more and I can win the game in like 5 turns and I have a couple moments piece. Like everything's going really well. And then game 1, they have the Orzhov, I forget what it's called, but the Orzhov card that causes the opponent to lose life equal to the amount of creatures that you have.
Yeah, harsh sustenance.
Yes, game 1, and I'm like, no, you're supposed to bring that in game 2. I'm not supposed to worry about this game 1.
Yeah, exactly. That's what makes that matchup so weird. Is you don't know what to expect. I've had people play Ulamog's Crusher in game 1 against me. I have people playing main deck Dispel in elves.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. Like I'm starting to run in my mono black control lists like Duress main board because there's so much removal and instants flying around.
Yep. I've seen main deck Fairy Macabre in mono black control.
I've thought about trying that over Chittering Rats, honestly.
Yeah, speaking of the Lexikov, he's been talking about that a lot. He says Chittering Rats is like a bygone era, and that people should be playing Fairy Macabre instead.
Oh yeah, Turbo Fog. No, but I get it. But I think Chittering Rats, because okay, well we can go off on a small tangent, but I've got a rat tribal deck that is purely hand disruption, where it's mainly a discard deck, but you have Ravenous Rats, Burglar Rats, and Chittering Rats, where they just, you play them and your opponent has to discard a card.
And Okiba Gang Shinobi?
Okiba Gang Shinobi, I've got that in there, as well as Skull Snatcher, which is a rat ninja. It's got ninjutsu for a single black mana, and when it deals damage, you exile a couple cards from the opponent's graveyard. And so, you can like ninjutsu, return a rat to your hand, play the rat again, make them discard again. So I think in a shell like that, where if your main goal is hand disruption, then Chittering Rats is really good. Or there's like the rat lock deck as well. So I think in that case, Chittering Rats is pretty good. But if in mono black control, it might just be better for Fairy Macabre, just because
Maybe.
like you're
Yeah.
not discarding that much, and there's so much card draw anyway. Like Chittering Rats probably makes your good matchups better, but your
Yeah.
bad matchups where you're running out of kill spells because your opponent's drawing so many cards.
Mm-hmm.
Chittering Rats just like, okay, they place the like something on top, and oh, they just brainstormed and shuffled it away anyway, and they're getting a fresh draw. So
Yeah. Well, the main thing that I've seen Chittering Rats do is that, like, if your opponent's already losing and then you play Chittering Rats, that basically makes them scoop the game.
it's so good.
Yeah. Like it's almost like it almost as if it says "I win" on the card,
Mm-hmm.
in that scenario. But a lot of the time, yeah, it can feel really lackluster. But yeah, maybe we are getting a little off topic here.
Okay. Yeah, Turbo Fog, right? That's what. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
all right. So the next question I want to ask is, so we obviously enjoy playing Turbo Fog. What do you think went wrong with our upbringing that we want to play Turbo Fog? That we enjoy doing it to other people?
Okay, well, I mean, I've got a couple good stories for that.
oh no.
So, I mean, it has to do with like how my very first like experiences with Magic the Gathering, right? So I had a cousin who introduced the game to me, and I was having really a lot of fun. He was showing me all the different colors. We were playing lots of games of Magic, and all of a sudden he said, "Hey, I want to show you something." And he says, "Here, take any deck you want. Doesn't matter. It can be the best deck, your favorite deck, whatever." So I take a deck that I like, and then he starts and he plays a Plains. And then next thing you know, he's completely locked me out of the game with solitary confinement lock.
Oh wow.
And I don't know if you know that card from Judgment. It's an enchantment, and it says you can't be the target of spells or abilities, and prevent all damage that would be dealt to you.
Wow.
But it also says that you can't you skip your draw step, and yeah, I think that's it. It's a really complex card, but he basically had a deck that made it so it completely locked me out of the game. And like, I was really young at the time. I must have been like 8 or 9 or something, and I was like borderline in tears from that experience. Right? I really didn't like. I felt betrayed by my cousin who was being so cool with me, and then suddenly,
how could you do this?
Yeah. So so that really marked me. And you know what? I've hated white ever since. White is my least favorite. Oh, I hate white so much.
Wow. I mean, my personal least favorite color is blue because it's the color of not fun.
Oh yeah, for me, white is the color of not fun. It's like I'm really happy with Pauper because white cards are bad.
And I mean, what the best like white deck is mono white heroic, which is just an aggro list that folds to Turbo Fog. Like that's probably one of, if not the best matchup for Turbo Fog, honestly.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we found out why you like Turbo Fog.
And I mean, and this also goes to show like when I played Legacy, in my late high school years, I was playing a lot of Legacy. I saved up to play Burn, which I had a lot of fun with. And then because I was playing a lot in Odyssey block, I had my Entomb, so I played Reanimator.
Okay.
And I had my Force of Wills and all that stuff. So I was like at a full Reanimator list that I had a lot of fun with. And I also had an egg deck. I don't know if you're familiar with eggs at all. So it's a combo deck. And I had a legacy version of it with City of Traders and Ancient Tomb so that I could basically win on turn 2.
Nice.
And so I was playing a lot of legacy like that. But my favorite deck was a mono white deck, which was Armageddon Stacks. And I don't know how familiar you are with that deck. But
I'm not too familiar, but if you say the word Armageddon and Stacks, I feel like I can start to piece together what the game plan is.
Yeah, so basically I was making my opponent miserable. I would play Smokestack so that they had to sacrifice permanents every turn. I was destroying all lands with Armageddon and playing Magus of the Tabernacle so that they had to sack their creatures if they didn't have any lands in play. It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. And I was basically the only one in my play group at that time, aside from one other person who was actually like investing a little bit more money into the game.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to have a tournament. And that tournament, basically, you would bring two decks, your two favorite decks, or the two decks you wanted to play to the tournament. Instead of having sideboards, you would switch out decks. Right?
Oh, okay, that's
That
interesting.
was it was a fun way to play. So I brought my egg deck and my reanimator deck to that.
Mm-hmm.
And this was kind of that moment where I realized, okay, maybe this game isn't fun if my opponent can't play the game, right? So I went up against my first opponent, my friend who had just started playing Magic a little bit, and he had his mono green, kind of like I built this yesterday kind of deck.
Yeah.
And he went turn 1 Forest. I went turn 1 Ancient Tomb, Helm of Awakening, everything costs 1 less. And he's like, oh, that's cool. Turn 2, he plays a dude. And then on my turn 2, he has to watch me play for 5 minutes while I run through my egg deck.
Yeah.
And game 2, he plays another like mono white dirtle deck that does nothing. He plays his plane, says go. I play turn 1 Swamp Entomb.
Mm-hmm.
Put Iona into my graveyard. Shield of Emeria.
Oh no!
And then on turn 2, Exhume Iona on white. Game over. Done.
Yep, right there. Just
so
yikes.
So my friend, never played Magic again.
What?
Yeah, he picked up his cards, left. And we would still hang out and stuff, but whenever we played Magic, he just left. He's like, no, I'm not doing this.
Oh, you traumatized him.
I absolutely traumatized him. And you know what? That was a really marking experience for me. And it's basically the reason why I started playing Pauper. I was like, okay, I talked to my other friend who was kind of investing a little bit more like me. And I said, you know what? Like, it's not fun if we're doing this way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's set some boundaries for ourselves and let's play something else. And he said, okay. And then I started looking up different formats. I was like, oh, Pauper looks cool. All commons. How cool could that be?
That's going to be jank.
Yeah, that's it. So we talked about it. He's like, oh, I'm going to play Infect. And then I was like, oh, I thought we said no arms race. Darn it.
Yeah.
So, and then Turbo Fog happened.
Yeah,
right?
we're back at the beginning.
Yeah.
Full circle.
Yeah, exactly. So it ended up being kind of the same deal where I still ended up making people miserable on a budget.
Mm-hmm. But it's budget misery, so it's not quite as bad.
Yeah. Although it's also kind of humiliating when, like your opponent's going to play like Legacy Affinity and I'm playing Turbo Fog and I'm like, oh, well, you lose. You can't beat me.
Turn 1. Is that an artifact land? I'll scoop the entire match. Nice. Yeah. Your opponent goes first, they play an artifact land, you're like, all right, good match, I scoop. Like, oh, game 2? Like, no, the entire match. That's nice.
No, well, against Affinity, Turbo Fog wins.
Oh, against like Legacy Affinity? Or is this Pauper?
No, Legacy Affinity.
Really? So I'm not too familiar with the Legacy Affinity list. Like, what does it look like?
Well, it looks a lot like the modern version, except it runs like Force of Wills and it did run some I don't see very much Legacy Affinity anymore, but back in the day, it used to look a lot like the modern Affinity lists of today. Mm-hmm. But what does Affinity do to stop infinite fogs?
Because in Pauper, they have ways to do. They carry the fling and kind of have the combo there.
Modern Affinity doesn't do that.
I didn't realize that they didn't have that.
No,
because like
it's
Pauper Affinity, it's kind of a neutral matchup for Turbo
I would
Fog.
say that.
I find, yeah, it can go either way.
Yeah, but the advantage of Turbo Fog is that it's not only good in Pauper, right? You can play this against casual decks, and you can play this even against some modern decks and do just fine with it, which is what's so cool about it.
Yeah, so... All right, next time my LGS has a modern night, I'm going to show up with my... Oh, no, I have Preordains on my list. Never mind, I can't do that.
Preordains, Moment Peace, like, you can't... Like in a tournament setting, you can't bring Turbo Fog to a modern deck. To a modern tournament, you're gonna get completely run over, but like in a casual setting, yeah, it was great.
Yeah, go for it. And it's one of those decks where it's like, even if you like lose, even if the game was like technically like not even close, it's the matches always feel close.
They do, because you're on the back foot, right?
You're reacting instead of being proactive.
That's right. And the opponent can build up the board as big as they want. They get to play their deck, right?
All they need is that one turn. Joke's on them. You're not going to give it to them.
They're never going to get it. Nope.
I hit all 4 frantic inventories and all 4 moments piece. You have nothing.
No, exactly. If you're playing all creatures, I don't care if you've got Liliana of the Veil, like you can make me discard every turn. Fine. I'm drawing 4 cards off my accumulated knowledge.
Okay. What is the best feeling when playing Turbo Fog? You do it and you just feel phenomenal.
So the best thing is when that opponent swings out and you tangle them.
Yeah, that's really
that's so
good. Okay, you shared a screenshot with me.
Yes.
I will put it up in the video, but for the people who are driving and don't look at the screen, do you want to explain a little bit about this screenshot?
Yeah, so this is before I started recording matches for Spell Slam, and essentially I was playing in I think this was a league, and the opponent, on turn 3 just exploded, Distant Melody, in basically infinite mana. They flooded the board with hundreds of elves on turn 3. And, we were typing in chat, I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I've never seen elves, go so deep so quickly. That's amazing. He's like, yeah, I've never seen that either, and he was going to hit me on turn 4. I think I counted it and it was like close to 500 damage on turn 4.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. That's reasonable.
And, yeah, so, I mean, imagine playing against that when you're playing any other deck.
Yeah,
you're dead, right?
You scoop. That's it.
That's it. It's over. But for me, I had a tangle in hand, and it was turn 4. I had mulligan to 5 in that match. And my opponent, as he attacks me, says, "I hope you have a fog in hand." All I do is
little did they know.
That's all I had. And I ended up winning that match.
Really?
So,
wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of those beautiful things about Turbo Fog is that even in those crazy scenarios where the opponent's completely going off the hook, just insane amounts of damage, it doesn't matter. Their creatures are blanks.
I mean, you just, wow, that's so many creatures that are just tapped for the next turn, and you just buy yourself so much time.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, he was totally screwed. He had enough, like that tangle allowed me to recover into a normal hand and then just win from there.
Beautiful. Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's probably one of my favorite moments playing Turbo Fog for sure. The other one of my favorite moments was when I was playing against Delver, and I actually won with a beatdown plan. So
what?
I was playing. Yeah, so I actually won with creatures attacking with my Turbo Fog deck, where because I was playing Krosan Tusker, right, as a draw spell. Well, it was really deep in the game. I had like 11 mana or something, so I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm playing this Krosan Tusker. And on top of that, it was game 2, and I had sideboarded in Penumbra Spider, which is a 4-mana 2/4 with reach. And when it dies, it makes another copy of itself. And so I actually won the game by fogging on my opponent's turn and then attacking back with Krosan Tusker and Penumbra Spider.
Wow.
So yeah, that was one of my favorite moments.
I don't think I can say I've gotten a win by the beatdown plan. I don't think I've ever played creatures in Turbo Fog.
Let's say that's a plan Z, I guess.
Yeah, that's
Turbo
like
Fog.
If everything else has gone wrong. I think one of the best feelings I've had is I was against blue-white familiars, which I'd say is a pretty hard matchup for Turbo Fog, at least game 1. Game 2, you can sideboard in a bunch of counter spells and dispels and whatnot. But game 1, like Azorius familiars, they just they don't win through combat. So that's kind of like your main goal is now just kind of useless, you know.
Yeah,
So
that's it. Well, a lot of that matchup's really weird.
yeah, it's generally really weird. I mean, it's weird because they can win from a beatdown plan from Mole Drifters, if nothing
Yeah,
else.
exactly. That's the thing. It's happened to me before where I would board out like all of my fogs and then get beat down by Augur of Bolas and Mole Drifters
Mm-hmm. So
and not be able to do anything about it.
yeah, so it's really weird, but it was game 1, and I think turn 4 or 5, so it's still relatively early into the game. I go ahead and I Stream of Thought. I don't replicate it. I was gonna have to discard a card anyway, so I'm like, whatever. It's 1 mana investment. It's not that big of a deal. So I Stream of Thought them, and I hit all 3 of their Archaeomancers into the graveyard. Along with a counter spell, and I was like, oh, and they scooped the entire match right there.
Oh, that's
like, yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, sometimes like mill is so it feels really, really useless most of the time, but you will get that occasional mill that completely ends the game where they're like, oh, that's in my graveyard. Okay, game over, done.
Yeah, it happened in the creators tournament. I was up against Appa. He was playing like an Azorius, kind of like beat down with various flyers, and there was the so he had like counter spells. I think he was running a fairy package in there as well, though I'm not entirely sure about that. But I once again in the beginning, I mill, I don't replicate, and I hit 3 counter spells with the mill, and it was I ended up losing the match overall, but I won the first game pretty handedly because he just did not have enough interaction for what I was doing, and I wonder why. But yeah, for people who don't know, Archaeomancer, it's a 4-cost creature. When it enters, you return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand, and it goes really well with Ghostly Flicker, where you just bounce a couple things and return back to the battlefield. So, and familiars, generally they win with that combo where Archaeomancer is kind of like bouncing itself and something else, and they have Sage's Row Denizen. Whenever a blue creature enters, someone mills for 2, and they just mill the opponent out. So there's another mill deck, although it's more of a combo deck.
Yeah, it's more of a combo deck, I guess.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
I don't know if I count Infinite Mill in 1 turn as like really a mill deck.
No, yeah, I kind of agree.
Yeah, so but obviously if they're not Tron, so they're not running green Pulse of Marasas to get things back from the graveyards, and they're just kind of relying on holding an Archaeomancer in hand until they can win with like some counterspell backup and like winning that way. But I mean, if they're all in the graveyard, then nope, can't win. And
yeah, that is a really nice feeling for sure. Yeah, I've had some lucky mills. Where, like, for example, against the elf deck, I would mill their 1 Ulamog's Crusher or whatever, and then they'd be like, oh, okay, good game. And then they would scoop. But I've never had that full, like, mill all 3 of the same card that they need or whatever like that. That's pretty amazing.
It was beautiful. And the thing is, like, if they ended up drawing them, then it's like, it did not matter how many counterspells I would have drawn. Like, they would have won. So it's kind of interesting how that worked out. But, what are some horror stories you have? Or like just everything's gone wrong?
Oh man. Well, I mean, aside from like, mulligans to 4 or whatever, I'm trying to think of, oh yes, I have the perfect story. Actually, yeah.
Oh no.
This was in a Pauper challenge, right? Those 7 match those 7 match days on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing Turbo Fog, which is an exhausting deck to play with, and
yeah, I don't know if I would choose that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't think I'd do that ever again, honestly. But oh man, I was playing against the Delver deck, and I was winning, and I was so happy. Everything was going great.
But
and then we entered in a counter war, right? And this was like the turn before I was going to win. The opponent had just a few seconds on their clock. They had like 2 or 3 cards left in their library, but they were attacking for a lethal attack. I fog, they counter, I fog, they counter, I counter back. And then I'm basically out of cards, but they have like 3 cards left in their hand, but I won the counter war. And then they return an island to their hand and cast Daze. I pay for the Daze. They return another island to their hand and cast another Daze. And then I pay for the Daze and I'm out of mana. My opponent returns another island to their hand and casts a third Daze.
The perfect hand they needed specifically to win.
I lost it. I just like I had to stand up and like get away from my screen because I was just like, I cannot believe that just happened. You know, it's like insane how close that was.
I had something like that. So as of the time we're recording, I do not have the second half of my Turbofog League out. But I do have the first half, and I have played the second half. I'm just editing it currently. So for my league, so for the first video, I went 0-3. And for the second part, so to wrap it up, I went 0-2. I went 0-5 in my first Pauper League.
Gosh.
With Turbofog. But I want to kind of go over it a little bit because I don't think it was necessarily me playing horribly or the deck just being super weak. I think I got super unlucky with just how things panned out.
Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes it happens. You just play like, Tron, Delver, Tron, Delver,
Okay, so
there's nothing you can do about that.
I'm going to run through each of the matchup. Like, I'm just going to say the deck, and I'm going to, and I want you to tell me if it's, good or if it's bad.
Okay.
Or, unlike, or, something if you would want to face it. Game 1, Tron.
Depends what Tron. Is this Flicker Tron?
Yes.
Yeah, don't want to face that.
This was the match with the Mortuary Mire that I talked a little bit about before, where they restocked their library, and it was not good. Oh man, I've got to actually remember this now. Game 2, it was an even. I remember it being an even matchup, or match 2. Match 2 being even. I think I won the first game, and then lost the mono black control.
That's a fun matchup to play. It's actually a really interesting one.
Yeah, because initially when I first thought about it, I'm like, dude, Turbofog, it's practically a free win. And then the more I went up against it, and then I kept my bounce lands kept getting choking sands and destroyed, and I fell victim to duress after duress. I was like, okay, maybe this isn't a free matchup.
No, it's definitely not a free matchup. I think Turbofog is slightly favored. And I mean, ever so slightly, maybe 55-45 kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty even matchup overall.
Yeah, it really depends if the mono black control player hits all of their choking sands and duress early on, then it's they're definitely favored at that point.
Absolutely. Your opening hands also is super important. You want to keep if you have a hand of 3 fogs and 3 lands and 1 draw spell, where you're probably going to lose that game, right? Whereas if you have a hand of 4 draw spells and 3 lands, well, you're much more favored to win that. Or 2 counters, 2 draw spells, 2 lands, and a fog or something. Those balanced hands are much better. It really depends on those openers.
Yeah, so that one really could have gone either way. From what I remember, it was pretty close. They just managed to hit their choking sands and duress both game 2 and game 3. So it was just it happens. And then this is an interesting one. So match 3, Burn.
Oh yeah, we could have an entire other podcast episode just to talk about this matchup. It's so interesting.
Yeah, because how many Weather the Storms are you running main deck in your sideboard?
4 in the main deck.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I'm running 2 in the main deck with 1 in the sideboard, and I'm considering bumping it up to 2 in the sideboard.
Oh, yeah, you definitely want all 4 copies somewhere. I've moved everything to the main board.
Wow, you find it that useful?
I think it's the best fog to have come out in recent times.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to try that.
I know it's not a fog, but in most scenarios, it acts as a fog or is even better.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Or in conjunction with a fog, it's phenomenal.
Absolutely. And I've even in matchups where Burn, for example, I will keep in a few fogs, but if I see that they're not playing creatures, I will actually cast fogs on their end step just to get my storm count up. To cast a bigger Weather the Storm, right? That card is so important at winning that matchup. and it's so important against those slower decks. Even Boros midrange it's the key card of that matchup.
Oh yeah, like their Galvanic Blast and Lightning Bolts is how they're going to win.
Exactly.
Boros. So it was like the first game wasn't close. They got the perfect like burn aggro, like I'm going to kill you very, very quickly, and there's not much you can do about it hand.
No.
And then game 2, it was definitely pretty close. I had to muddle. I ended up muddling for a Weather the Storm because obviously it's burn. I was getting low, and I made it through there. So they on their turn, they drop a land, they play like a sorcery speed burn spell, and then they pass turn. And I was like, okay, so they have 4 cards in hand, and it comes back to me. I have a Stream of Thought, a Fog, 3. I have 2 Dispels and a blue Elemental Blast, and a Weather the Storm in hand. So I'm like, okay,
nice hand.
I thought so, but yeah, we're talking about this in the worst feeling section. So yeah, so I thought it was pretty good, and I didn't want to give it back to them because if they I didn't want to give it back to them without playing the Weather the Storm, because if they drew a sorcery speed burn effect, that would just be one more thing, because I think I was at 3 life. So like literally 1 burn spell away from dying, and if I passed it back to them, it was potentially 1 more spell that they could use against me to get through all my counters and whatnot.
Yeah, how many cards in hand did they have?
4.
4. Okay.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger now, and so I Streamed of Thought, didn't replicate it, so only 1 mana, and then I fogged on my turn, and then I Weather the Stormed. So and I had 2 mana. I think I had 2 mana left available to me. I think I only had 3 blue mana available at the time. So there was, and I wanted obviously as big of a Weather Storm as I could get. And I thought Weather the Storm, 2 Dispel, counter up. No, they had 3 cards in hand. So, and I was like, with like 2 Dispels or blue Elemental Blast, and like this gives me like pretty good odds of getting through this. So I'll take these odds. And so I cast Weather the Storm, and they cast Lightning Bolt. I'm like, Dispel. I'm like, Lightning Bolt, Dispel. I'm like, okay, I'm all tapped out, and they're tapped out too. And I was like, okay, Fire Blast. And I was like, oh, come on. Like, they had the perfect hand to burn through like my only out. And it was just like, oh, come on. So like I ended up going 0-3 in the first video. And that was really unfortunate, and especially against the Tron game 2, I had to mull down to 4 to hit a single land.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah,
and so I definitely lost that one. And then in the video that's going to come out before this, because it's this, and then I'll probably do well, I hope my viewers like Turbo Fog, because my 3 videos in a row about it. But it's and then first matchup again, I went up against blue-red Scred. Fairies.
Yeah, with the Delver, with the fairies and the ninja and everything. Yeah, so that's a terrible matchup.
I think I won the first game and then lost the other 2.
That's often what happens to me now as well. I'll take down that first game, and then they just bring in their Pyroblasts or Red Elemental Blasts on top of Dispels and whatever, and they just wreck me in 1 turn.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. Although I think I was very close to having the win, but they needed exactly 3 counter spells. 3 out of the 4 cards in their hand to be counter spells in order to win, and they got it. So it was it was once again just like, unfortunately, they had the absolute perfect draw or the perfect hand to get through and to prevent me from winning. So that's what happens.
That's the part of Turbo Fog that a lot of people don't really think about, is that because you give the opponent so much time to prepare, and because you're so reactive, they get to sculpt their hand and dictate when that fight is going to happen. Right?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because there's so much skill in the matchup, not necessarily on your part as the person piloting the deck. Obviously, I think Turbo Fog is a very difficult deck to like pilot. There's so many things that you can do wrong, but it's also a very difficult deck to play against because it's so much on the opponent to do. If they know what they're doing, they can easily bring a matchup that's supposedly winnable to a toss-up. Like on supposedly like favored, very heavily Turbo Fog favored to a toss-up if they know what they're doing. And then for my last match, I was up against Flickertron again.
Oh god.
So unfortunately, in that one, I think I lost 0-2 because once they got Tron, they had I'd never seen Flickertron play this before. I guess they were like trying something out. They had a red elemental creature. I forget what it was called, but it had Evoke. And when it entered the battlefield, you destroyed target land. And it was just so they put that in and they just kept flickering it and they blew up my entire mana base.
Yeah, Fault Grinder, I think is the name of the card.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I think that's it. So unfortunately, like I went 0-5, but even looking back, like I don't think it's because Turbo Fog is like some super weak only jank deck. I think I just got super unlucky, and the fact that I didn't hit like any mono green Stompy or mono white Heroic or any of these other decks that tend to be pretty popular, or slivers that tend to be pretty popular in leagues. I didn't hit any of them. And so unfortunately, like I had 3 horrible matchups and 2 matchups that were like, one was like only barely favored towards me and the other one was like not favored towards me.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was so hard.
That reminds me of when I took my biggest break from playing Turbo Fog, and it's just a really weird time because this was during the time of Treasure Cruise.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what Treasure Cruise is?
Yeah, the Delve.
Yeah, the Delve card. It's a 7 mana sorcery that you can delve, and it draws you 3 cards. I have to say, this is probably when Turbo Fog was at its best. This was like, this card made Turbo Fog the best it could probably be, I think.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
And yet, at the same time, it made every other deck the best it could possibly be. It made those other blue decks really, really powerful. So even though Turbo Fog was an extremely powerful deck with Treasure Cruise, you were just facing Delver deck after Delver deck after Delver deck. I remember playing 3 leagues in a row and playing 15 matches of Delver.
Just all in a row.
Just all in a row. All in a row. This happened to me. And that's when I said, okay, I've had enough. I actually stopped playing MTGO for a few months just till things calmed down, because Turbo Fog was completely unplayable.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, it's like, and you're helping fuel their 1 mana draw 3 spell by just giving them things that they can delve away.
Yep, exactly. There's just, it was so hard. Even though, Turbo Fog was so good. You're just playing that bad matchup over and over again.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we've gone on for quite a while. I want to start looking at wrapping this up. However, there is one more thing I want to ask you, and that is cards you would like to eventually see in Turbo Fog. So like either downshifts or just like cards that are just like, oh, if only there was a card that had this effect. I would really like to see it.
Yeah, it's becoming harder and harder to think of these cards because I feel like Turbo Fog has become so tight. And it's become such like Weather the Storm is like a godsend. It's that card has been so good, and the same goes for Stream of Thought. These cards are things that like I couldn't even have conceived of back in the day that really like turned Turbo Fog on its head and changed the way that we play this deck. If I were to think of like a possible downshift, like a reasonable like I could think of like tons of cards that would be better, but they wouldn't be reasonable. You know what I mean? Like if I wanted like Orim's Chant to be pauper legal, that would be just stupid, right? That would never happen.
Ancestral Recall be for Turbo Fog?
Exactly. So like if I wanted to be reasonable about a downshift, I think this may be a big ask, but I think Sphinx's Tutelage would be okay.
That would be nice.
And especially in pauper, where people are running like 16 land decks that are all monocolored, Sphinx's Tutelage would be amazing. in this. And 3 mana is still a lot to pay, and the activated ability is not that great, and it can be hated out with enchantment. So I think that would be a reasonable downshift that would really make Turbo Fog very, very strong.
Yeah. So I think that Jace's Erasure as a mill enchantment is just too weak, as well as Curse of the Bloody Tome, I think, is the other one.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, like, why don't you play Curse of the Bloody Tome as, Jace's Erasure 5 through 8? I get the question very often. And I was just like, well, because it only mills for 2. Like, that's the top end.
Why would you play it?
Yeah, it just was never good enough.
It's 3 mana, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can't even, so that's it. So Muddle the Mixture can't fetch it up either. It was just so much worse than Jace's Erasure.
Yeah, it's definitely I don't think I would ever really consider Curse of the Bloody Tome, but if there was like a stronger, like Sphinx's Tutelage, a stronger Jace's Erasure, then I think something like that would find its way back into the deck. But as far as like, it's hard to think of cards for Turbo Fog, because it's like, what would you give it? If you give it stronger card draw, then all of a sudden all of the other blue decks get stronger card draw as well.
I think what would really benefit Turbo Fog would be very specific cards, right? So like, one thing that I would really love to see, and I think is going to happen one day, is a Simic Fog. Like a blue-green costing fog that does fog and does either card filtering, draws, or scries.
That would be nice. Like blue-green fog, scry 2 or something.
Something like that would be amazing. I would replace my fogs or my tangles with that.
Yeah.
Hands down. Or if it was just a cantripping fog, like prevent all combat damage, draw a card. Oh my goodness. I'd be all over that. That would be so great. So good.
Draw a card for each card like this in your graveyard. No, that's too much. Frantic inventory and a fog stapled together.
Yeah, that's too much to ask, I think.
There's I forget what the card is called, but it's a card that I forget what the initial casting cost is, but it gets reduced down to a single blue mana if your opponent has like 20 or more cards in their graveyard. And so it's like a single blue mana and you draw 3 cards. And I forget exactly what the cutoff is. I'm forgetting a lot of details, but the important thing,
if they have 20 20 cards or less in their library, I think, or is it 20 cards or more in their graveyard? It's something like that. It
might be graveyard, and I think something like that would be like, because obviously I don't think the other blue decks would be able to take advantage of that.
No,
although
definitely not.
That would mean that graveyard hate would become what do you run as graveyard hate in your deck?
I've tried all sorts of stuff. Like, I used to run a full playset of Fairy Macabre in my deck. And that was okay. I just found it never really worked. Even if it was free and uncounterable against Tron, it never seemed to do the job often enough. And then I tried Relic of Progenitus. I don't think
I would put that, like, that hurts you too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, but you can play around it. Like, I've often found that people playing Relic of Progenitus against me, I haven't found it to be as good as they might think it is initially, right? Because I find it easy to play around those cards most of the time, and like, I can basically dictate when my opponent cracks their relic as well. Like, I'm in control of their relic in a lot of ways, like in what they decide to do with it.
Yeah, because the only time I really find Relic to be backbreaking is if it's like turn 1 Relic, and you're like, like everything I'm never gonna get a card in my graveyard now.
Yeah, I don't even worry about it, honestly. Like, I let them eat my spell, my cards in the graveyard. It costs them time from their timer, which puts them under a lot of pressure that way. And and eventually, when you crack your Terramorphic Expanse, you play a Ponder and a Preordain, you start to pull ahead slowly in the mid game, and then eventually that one card per turn doesn't really do much, right? And you can also control your draw with that using Relic of Progenitus. So like you can play your first accumulated knowledge, and then when they try to exile it, well, you can play the other accumulated knowledge in response, and then still draw the 2 cards. So and then that forces them to either trip it and sack it, and then you've gotten rid of it. So like I don't know, maybe I'm just a positive thinker, but I find that it's relatively easy to play around a relic compared to like a Fairy Macabre against me.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, because it's something that you can plan around it. You can kind of structure your plays that way you don't get completely blown out by a relic. And then the tough for me, it's only really backbreaking if it's like early on in the game, because I want to keep my frantic inventories and accumulated knowledges. And if you're kind of relying on like cantripping at the end of their turn on turn 2 with one of those cards, then it really weakens future draws of those cards, which stinks.
I suppose that's, it's funny that you say that, because I really feel like it's much more backbreaking in the very, very late game when you've got like 40 cards in your graveyard or 20 something cards in your graveyard, and then they play a relic, and then you just so happen to not have an answer for it. And then like they get to exile like 3 of your accumulated knowledges, and like all of your value, your extra moments pieces are all gone. And that's what really bothers me.
Maybe it just literally comes down to just like experience playing the deck, whereas I don't have as much experience as you do, so I find early game it much more backbreaking, whereas you find it in the late game where I don't find it as backbreaking. It could just be like a relative thing where you've learned how to play around it like much more than I have, and so it's not such a big deal. So it's only like in the early game, so like relatively speaking, it's the late game where it hurts, whereas something, I don't know, just it's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, that's it. I'm surprised that we have such a different idea of how Relic of Progenitus affects the gameplay. But yeah, that's, maybe it is just an experience thing, and learning to play around it appropriately is, it takes time. Everything takes time. Like I said, the timer on MTGO, like I tend to play Turbo Fog quickly because I've played it so much. So I'm usually ahead on time. And so when a game goes really, really long and I have like 16 minutes left on my clock and my opponent has like 10, and then they play a Relic of Progenitus, I'm super happy.
Yeah, I don't even think about the time aspects. That's another thing to keep in mind.
Oh yeah, time is a win condition. Unfortunately, that's one of the things I hate about the deck, is that it is a win condition. Playing quickly means you're going to win a lot more, right? Because your opponent is taking time to think about these things, and when they play a Relic of Progenitus, it takes them like 2 clicks every time to target you and target and then wait for you to, it's just it takes forever. So Relic of Progenitus is a time waster that I appreciate my opponent playing a lot of the time.
Yeah, I always feel bad for the people with bad internet connections whenever I'm playing, because it's like it's basically a deck they can never win against, not because of anything they're doing. It's just they literally cannot play fast enough. Although I tend to not feel as bad. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I don't feel as bad if it's like I'm the worst I think it's gotten for me is where I've timed someone out and I've still had over 20 minutes left on my clock. And it's just like, sucks. And you've just had, because it's not fun for either party, because like no one got to play Magic at that point.
That's it. So, that's one of my least favorite things about MTGO is when like opponents take forever to play because they're having connectivity issues. They've played like 10 minutes on their clock and I've played less than a minute. And it's it's not fun for me, and it's really not fun for the opponent.
Yeah, it's just a feels bad all around, honestly.
For sure. Yeah. If I were to have one last request in terms of like general card effects, like we talked about the Simic Fog, the last thing that I would like is a 2-mana counterspell that exiles a spell.
Ooh, there would have to be something stapled on there for like a condition to be met or something, because like, that would be very strong in like traditional blue control builds. Like
I was thinking of like, Prohibit, that 2-mana counterspell. If Prohibit, that counters something that costs 3 or less, if Prohibit had an exile clause, I would be playing that spell.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, you can just exile Spellstutter Sprite.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, Spellstutter Sprite's a problem, but if I manage to, or like Stonehorn Dignitary, in if you're not playing Turbo Fog or whatever,
Ghostly
or
Flicker.
like Ghostly Flicker, you exile that spell for 2 mana. That would be the best. I would love that spell.
I'm trying to think of like a condition, like if
there's one card that does that. I think it's called Gone Awry.
Gone Awry.
Yeah, it's a devoid spell from Rise of the Eldrazi or something. It's an uncommon, and it counters a spell that costs 4 or less, and it exiles it for 2 mana. So I think that would be probably too strong for Pauper, but if it was maybe 3 or less and not devoid, I think that would be appropriate.
Here's a question. So I'm just trying to think of like a counterspell that would exile for 2 mana would be strong for Turbo Fog, but not completely broken for these other blue control decks. Would you put a counterspell like that in 2 mana, exile, if you had to maybe shuffle cards, like you get to choose, maybe not you get to choose, but your opponent gets to shuffle a card from their graveyard back into their library, or 2 cards or something.
That's a tough one.
That would be like, because it's kind of like, it gets the trade-off to where like, yeah, it's an insanely good counterspell, but your opponent gets something back out of it as well. If it's if it's 1 card, I might include it. If it's if it's shuffling in more than 1, then no.
No, probably not. Like, what if it costs blue? 2 blue.
2 blue, yeah. Then if it costs blue, I mean, it can't be strictly better than counterspell. So maybe blue with that shuffle back in 1 card.
Yeah. Oh, that's a tough call. But yeah, I wish there was something like that, because, like if there's Fairy Trickery that does that, Syncopate does that, but those are all really expensive counter spells, and you can't afford to use them in Counter Wars.
Yeah, it's just too much.
Yeah, 3 mana is too much to pay. I think 2 mana would be just right, but we're just not there yet.
I'm wondering if there was what would be interesting is I think there's a counterspell with the suspend mechanic on it.
Yeah, I think it's just called Delay.
I don't think that's legal in Pauper.
No, it's an uncommon. That would be an interesting spell for sure.
Because then it completely negates like counterspells. Because they cast them back at their upkeep. Like there's no spell on the stack anymore. It completely fizzles. And then they would still get Spellstutter Sprites and things like that, but it would that might be an interesting one.
Yeah, I could see that being pretty good. Yeah,
I
would probably play that.
I don't think it would, like, there might be some broken interaction with it, but I don't think there would be too much, because it would benefit. It would be almost like a card like Dispel, where you want to bring it in against other control matchups because it would be really good against counterspells. But if your opponent's playing big creatures, then it wouldn't be good anyway, because then they get the big creature anyway.
Back. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that would be definitely playable. Trying to think of if that would be broken in any other strategy. I think it would just act as just another solid counter most of the time.
Yeah.
And often just delaying the opponent, which is what Turbo Fog does, is more than enough.
Yeah, so I feel like we've touched on a lot of good things about Turbo Fog. So before we wrap it up, was there anything you would like to add? Any last minute topics or good stories, things like that?
I think we covered a lot of the sweet stories already. I'm trying to think of anything else, kind of looking through the questions that you sent me. And I mean, yeah, I think Turbo Fog is in a really good place right now. It's I mean, aside from Treasure Cruise, it's never been in a better spot really to be played. And I think everybody should try it out and at least be aware of it and know that it exists. and as unfortunate as that would be for me as a Turbo Fog player, I think everybody should know what Turbo Fog is and how it works so that they're ready for it.
And okay, so if you could give one piece of advice, like if there's a mistake you keep seeing over and over again, what do you want people to actually realize? Like, how would they beat Turbo Fog and not just completely screw the match by duressing and taking the Tangle instead of the Weather the Storm?
I think it's two things, right? And that the first thing is just like be patient. And to play efficiently, right? To understand, and the next thing will be just to understand what Turbo Fog is trying to do, right? So it's all about knowledge. The more you know how to fight the deck, the better your duress is going to be. The better, and keeping a cool head about it too, not getting tilted is one of the most important things. And it's hard against Turbo Fog. It's a very tilting deck to play.
Because it's just like you have to keep swinging in and your opponent keeps drawing freaking more fogs. How many are in their deck? This is stupid. Yeah.
And it's not as many as you think, right?
It's only like, honestly, I'm only running like 10. I'm running
I'm down to 8 fogs plus the 4 the 4 Weather the Storm.
Yeah, if we're counting Weather the Storm, then yeah, I'm running 12 because I'm running 2. But yeah, like it's not near. Honestly, if it's one thing, I think people focus on the wrong thing when trying to beat Turbo Fog. You don't attack the fogs; you attack the card draw.
Absolutely.
I have lost so many games to people actually attacking the card draw. Like they wait for their graveyard hate until the card draw. They don't worry about the moments piece that's sitting, flashbackable in my graveyard. Right. They wait until I get like that, like draw 3 cards, accumulated knowledge, and Fairy Macabre away the other 2 accumulated knowledges.
Yep, that's the way to go. Yeah, it's choosing your moment as well. Like, and to understand that Turbo Fog is reactive, and understanding that Turbo Fog is reactive means that you can choose your moment. Right, and that gives a lot of initiative to the opponent playing against Turbo Fog. Yeah. If you're able to pick the moment when Turbo Fog is weakest, that's your best opportunity, and you need to wait. You need to be patient and look for that opportunity.
Yeah, and I lost my train of thought. This is not fair, but
you lost your stream of thought.
Yeah, apparently. Did you replicate it? No, it's just like Turbo Fog is just one of those decks where you have to keep pressuring it. I don't understand the people who get frustrated and their answer to the frustration is not swinging in. Like, oh, they have a fog anyway. Like, there's no point in swinging. It's like, then make me use it. Like, I'm never not going to have a fog unless you like make me use it. Like, make me have another one.
Yeah. Exactly. They need to be taking that initiative and pressuring as often as possible at every given opportunity.
And honestly, there's no such thing as like, unless it is the very last turn, like Turbo Fog is never in a position where it's like, oh, they have this game in the bag. Because I've lost so many games where the opponent has had like less than 20 cards left in the library, and all I need is one stream of thought, but I just drew my 3rd land in a row, and I'm out of fogs, and that's it. That's game over. And
no, exactly. You could lose at any moment with Turbo Fog. You have no idea, right?
Which honestly kind of makes it more exciting. You're like, ooh, like
yeah, that's it. It is exciting to play Turbo Fog. You're always, on the ropes.
You're never comfortable, which I can see how some people would absolutely hate that, but honestly, when you're playing a lot of matches, it keeps the deck fresh.
Yeah, that's it. And that's basically why I keep coming back to it over and over again for, it's going to be a decade one day.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah. 10 years of Turbo Fog.
Oh God.
All right. So where can they find you?
Well, on YouTube, just type in Spell Slam, Turbo Fog. I think if you even just type in Turbo Fog, you'll end up finding a good portion of my videos. Like Spell Slam is a channel that was started by me and my friends, and then my friends kind of gave up on the idea a part of the way through, and I've been kind of like quote unquote keeping the seat warm for 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the object of this is it's really like a teaching moment, right? So when you're watching one of my deck techs, or you're watching one of my matches, the reason why I'm recording so much is that I want people to understand what this deck, whatever deck I'm playing, they can get a good idea of how to play it and what the matchups are like, right? So I want people to try out the decks that I'm trying out.
I mean,
so that's the goal.
Yeah, I specifically, actually, I started watching you play Turbo Fog. I was like, oh, that's a really cool deck. I want to build it. And then I saw that, Moments Piece was like $8-9 for a full play set. I was like, maybe later. But then once Mason came with like the budget list idea that he had, I jumped on it because I was like, ooh, I want to play it. I watched you for a while, like having fun with the deck. I was like, I want to have fun with the deck.
Yeah, it's a blast. It's a blast to play. So Spell Slam, you can come and watch my 154 matches of Turbo Fog and counting, or you can pick any other deck you want. I've got probably going on like 15 or 16 different decks that I play about 20 to 25 matches of. So you can get a really good idea of how those decks play and how they change over time, right? So that's kind of the point of Spell Slam. And you can reach out to me in the comments there. I'm really, really good at getting back to you in the comments, as well as at spellslammers@gmail.com. You can send me emails there, and I like to respond to emails. You can send me your decks, and I'm very happy to help you tweak it or help you build with ideas. And you can also reach out to spellslam@facebook.com. I do not check Facebook very often. I got to get better at that. I promise I will.
All right. So I just want to say, well, first of all, thank you for coming on. It's actually
been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's actually really cool because I didn't even know Turbo Fog was a thing until I started watching your videos. And that was even before I really kind of came back. I took a break in making content for a while, but then when I came back, I was already started watching you, and I was like, oh man, dude, that deck's so cool. So it's actually pretty cool to have you on the podcast and whatnot. But
it makes me so happy that people appreciate the content, because my goal was never to do this. I was just literally keeping the seat warm until my friends decided to start working on the channel with me, and it just so happened that now I'm posting 5 matches a week for the past 4 years or something. I did take a hiatus, last year for most of 2019, but I was getting married at that time, so I was really, really busy.
Okay. You have a good excuse.
Yeah, but now I'm back, and I'm working like crazy on bringing a whole bunch of new content. I'm trying to improve my content as well, and maybe one day I'll have more than just Pauper content up here. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, so I do want you to know, though, that I do look forward to sitting down with my bowl of cereal every morning and opening up YouTube and watching the latest Spell Slam gameplay.
Yay!
I know. I try to leave a comment, every once in a while. I don't comment every single time, but just know.
Oh yeah, well, feel free to drop by anytime. Just say hello. It's great. I'm just so happy. That's everything I want from my content, is that every morning you can wake up and know that I'll be there. 5 days a week, I'm gonna be there for you.
Well, every 5th day I might have a video. Might be 6. So something similar with me. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I don't put in the same amount of effort into my videos. So I feel like I really favor quantity over quality. You know what I mean? It's just basically me with a video game and a recording hardware recording my games. I don't do any editing, or barely any editing at all, and I just post them right away, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's each format has its upsides and downsides. There's not one that's better than the other.
No, that's it. Like my idea was like, yeah, I want to have something regular that people will enjoy every day, but it doesn't. But I'm not going to put in hours and hours of editing into it and make
Yeah.
it a beautiful video, right? I don't have. I To me, that's more time consuming than actually making one video every 5 or 6 days.
Oh, it definitely is. Or editing the special video every 5 or 6 days. That's definitely like very.
That's a lot of work.
It's yeah. It has its, like I said, upsides and downsides. Like one of the things, like part of the reason why I edit is because like you've obviously been playing Pauper for a very long time, and same with a lot of the other gameplay channels, like Sin City, Propaganda. They've been playing for a very long time, and so me strolling up as like the new kid on the block who's innocent and didn't have to deal with infects back in the day, or you had like just started getting Storm. Like I don't have that moments of experience, but I was like, you know what? If I make my videos pretty, people will want to watch them. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, and that's, and so yeah, and it's easier for like newer players to Pauper to digest as well.
Sure.
So
yeah, like my videos are pretty crude. Like you need to understand the matchups. Like I do explain some things, but I do take a lot of things for granted. When I'm talking about metagame and like what I'm expecting from the deck, like I'm assuming a lot of newer players have no idea what I'm talking about, right? You need to be an enfranchised Pauper player to like really follow completely what I'm talking about.
Yeah, or how we forgot to explain stream of thought until like halfway through.
That's it. Like to me, that's a given. But I have 20 years of Magic behind me, and I've never skipped a beat, really.
Yeah. So, I just want to like thank you for taking the time to come on. Like it's been great, honestly.
Yeah, it's been really fun. And like I said, we could have an entire other podcast where we just talk about Burn if you want, and the Turbo Fog matchup. There's just so much to talk about.
All right, I think I'm gonna take a small break from Turbo Fog on my channel. I don't want people to like. I'll still obviously be playing it, but just like I don't want.
Sorry. One last place where you can reach me is MTG Salvation, of course. MTG Salvation on the like. Maybe you could put a link to the primer there. I'm checking MTG Salvation a few times a week. I update that primer regularly with 5.0 decks that succeed with Turbo Fog. My own thoughts. People can come and ask me questions or ask for help with their deck, and I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, so in the description, I'll put a link to your primer, your channel, and then there's that one other thing we were talking about, the report.
That report. I'm going to send that to you. Yeah. It's really fun.
I'll also put that in the description if people are interested in reading that. But,
absolutely.
So thank you. It's been a lot of fun. But now I think we do have to say goodbye.
Well, again, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah. So I just want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to listen to the podcast. I really do appreciate it. It's not just a little outro. I do appreciate it. And but now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to force my opponent to sit there and do nothing but beg for the sweet release of death, as I also do nothing. Bye.